Maomao, an ordinary apothecary who maintains a careful manner and loves making medicine and other weird things, until she was unfortunately kidnapped and sold off to the Empire Court. But for Maomao it wasn't all bad considering she got somewhat of a salary and figured she would just finish her term and get it over with. However, when an emperor's son fell mysteriously ill, and Mao being the curious person she is chose to secretly solve the case, causing her story to begin. Maomao was busy tending the garden at home when her father asked her to deliver medicine to the verdigris house. Just as she was leaving, he warned her to be careful since kidnappings had become more common in their city, which, despite its beauty, was becoming more dangerous. She reassured him that she would be safe and set off. Maomao City was a lively and bustling place in China, with many travelers and residents filling the streets. Among them was a woman named Nadia, known for her beauty, mingling with the crowd. Everyone seemed to be preparing for something important, especially the young women, who were hoping to earn good money. Meanwhile, Maomao was preoccupied with treating a wound she had gotten during one of her apothecary experiments. As she worked, a well-known figure in her household, a princess named Perrin, greeted her warmly. Later, Maomao's grandmother approached and asked her if she had ever considered becoming a courtesan, hinting that it might be a more lucrative life for her. Maomao, however, was disinterested and assured her grandmother that she had no interest in that line of work. That day, as Maomao wandered in the garden, she was unexpectedly kidnapped by 3 men. Well, I can't say she really resisted considering she just let it happen to a degree. Meanwhile, in another part of the city, Lady Lihua, one of the emperor's consorts, gave birth to a new prince. Maomao's life changed drastically in the following months. After being held captive, she believed she had been sold or ransomed. She missed her life as an apothecary and often worried about her father. Maomao shared her thoughts on the royal palace with others she met. She explained that the rear palace was a secluded section where the emperor's concubines and servants lived, giving birth to his children. The area was restricted, allowing only the emperor, his kin, and eunuchs, men who had been physically altered to serve the palace. Over 2,000 concubines, servants, and 1,000 eunuchs lived there, many of whom, Mao noted, were barely literate and received only basic training. Despite the palace's grandeur, Maomao preferred a simpler life outside, where she could work freely and eventually leave. One day, she noticed Lady Lihua looking ill, cradling her newborn son. 2 gentlemen, including Master Jin, observed her condition. They discussed how another child, belonging to a woman named Xiaoling, was also unwell. The physician was too busy, leaving Lady Lihua and her child without medical attention. As gossip about a palace curse spread, Maomao's friend Lan shared that the emperor's previous children had all died from illness, which fueled the belief in the curse. Lady Lihua was an important consort, yet there were whispers that the emperor favored another woman, Jiao. This hinted at a struggle for power and influence within the palace. Maomao couldn't ignore Lihua's worsening illness, even though she tried to avoid palace politics. Then, a confrontation occurred between Lihua and Jiao, which caught Maomao's attention. She questioned why the palace doctors hadn't been able to find a cure. Observing the situation closely, she thought she might know the source of the illness but wasn't sure how to communicate it to the consorts. Tragically, Lady Lihua's son passed away shortly afterward. A month later, Jin visited Jiao, who mentioned finding a note attached to a rhododendron plant. The note warned against letting babies near the plant, as it contained a powder that could be poisonous. Jiao asked Jin to discover who had left the note, suspecting it could have been Maomao after encountering her during Lihua and Jiao's dispute. Soon after, Maomao was summoned to meet the matron of the serving women. Jin was present, and as the other girls giggled at his handsome looks, he dismissed them all, leaving only Maomao behind. She realized that he had singled her out because she was the only one who could read. Jin brought Maomao to Jiao's quarters, where she was thanked for saving Xiaoling's life with the warning note. Maomao tried to dismiss it, saying it was likely a misunderstanding. But Jin pulled out the note and pointed out that the fabric it was written on matched the material used for the serving girls' uniforms. Jin asked her why she had left the flower on the windowsill. Maomao explained that she used to work as an apothecary and knew the high-end powder courtesans used was poisonous. She explained that this same powder had likely caused the illnesses affecting Jiao, Lihua, and their children, stating that some people trade their life for beauty. As Maomao shared her knowledge, Jiao presented a specific powder the nurse had used on her child, confirming Maomao's suspicions. Jiao admitted she had tried warning Lihua about the note, but Lihua hadn't taken her seriously. She was grateful to Maomao and, in return, offered her a position as her lady-in-waiting, a position of higher status and trust. Maomao accepted the position but was secretly worried. She had always intended to keep a low profile, and being a lady-in-waiting to Jiao meant being more visible in the palace intrigues. But now, with her knowledge of medicine and her skills as an apothecary, she was more entangled in palace life than ever. A group of soldiers sent to a nearby village to combat rumored threats. As night falls, they set up camp and gather for a meal around a fire. But soon after eating, one by one, the soldiers start collapsing, realizing too late that their food has been poisoned. Amid cries of panic, they accuse the villagers of tampering with the food, suspecting them of siding with enemy forces. To punish the villagers, the soldiers capture and stab them, taking even the village leader into custody under suspicion of aiding their enemies. Back at the palace, a man named Gao Shun reports the poisoning incident to Jin. Gao Shun mentions the village leader's arrest and shares news about the tensions brewing between the two royal consorts, Jiao and Lady Lihua. Despite Lihua's larger staff of over 10 servants, Jiao is seen as the wiser and more cautious of the two, with only 4 loyal ladies in waiting. Jin decides to keep an eye on Maomao, a young apothecary who has recently entered Jiao's service. Though she has valuable medical knowledge, he worries she could misuse it. One day, as Maomao is heading to assist Jiao, she crosses paths with Jin. He offers to walk with her and, trying to gauge her loyalty, asks if she needs anything from him. Maomao politely declines, showing little interest. Jin, slightly intrigued, tries to charm her, brushing her hair gently. But Maomao remains unfazed, merely acknowledging his words to take good care of the queen before walking away. Jin, surprised by her indifference, realizes that his attempt at winning her over has failed. Nonetheless, he reminds her the next day to serve Jiao well. As Maomao settles into her role, she is introduced to the Jade Pavilion, where she meets Hong Yang, Jiao's head lady-in-waiting, as well as her fellow attendants Yinghua, Giyuan, and Ailan. They show Maomao around and explain that Jiao prefers a more intimate circle, relying on her ladies-in-waiting for assistance rather than a larger staff. Although Maomao offers to help, she is told that Jiao has a special task waiting for her. Maomao soon learns about her new responsibility. She's to test all food for poison before it reaches Jiao. Jin explains that the princess's meals have been tampered with in the past, leading to her son's tragic death. This precaution is now in place to ensure Jiao's safety. Excited by the task, Maomao eagerly starts tasting the food, unfazed by the risks because of her background as an apothecary. She reveals that she has experimented with various toxins, even surviving snake bites in her own lab. This experimentation has made her nearly immune to most poisons, making her well suited to this unusual duty. Jin and the others watch, baffled, as Maomao seems to enjoy the task, savoring each bite as if she's at a feast. She even suggests using silver plates, which would change color if exposed to poison. Hong Yang is impressed, remarking that Maomao should have revealed her expertise sooner, as it would have earned her a higher salary. Maomao, however, chose to keep her skills hidden, not wanting her captors to profit from her abilities. This job, however, means she'll finally be able to earn money for herself. After some time, Maomao begins to grow bored with poison testing, finding it routine. Jin brings her a batch of buns to check, but he doesn't seem interested in eating them himself, perhaps out of lingering suspicion. He then tells her about the soldiers' poisoning incident in the village, describing how the soldiers blamed the villagers. Curious, Maomao asks where the soldiers ate and what utensils they used. She proposes an unusual theory: the poison might have come from the firewood they used to cook, possibly tainted in some way. During their conversation, Jin suddenly asks Maomao if she can make an aphrodisiac, another special request. She accepts eagerly, thrilled by the challenge. The next day, she is led to a room where she can work on the recipe, but soon notices that her ingredients are short on cacao. After requesting more supplies, she completes the mixture. However, she gets a bit creative, making some brownies with the aphrodisiac and secretly setting them aside. When Maomao returns, Hong Yang is furious. The other ladies in waiting had eaten the brownies, completely unaware of their effects. Embarrassed but amused, Maomao presents the finished aphrodisiac and other concoctions to Jiao. Jin, observing her work, praises her effort, though there is a tension between them. Meanwhile, Maomao notices a stranger watching one of the female attendants from a distance, raising her suspicions. She realizes that palace life is filled with hidden dangers, intricate relationships, and unexpected requests. Each task, from tasting poison to making strange concoctions, brings her closer to the palace's secrets. But Maomao, curious and resilient, approaches each challenge with a steady resolve, determined to keep her independence despite the power struggles and shadows of the royal court surrounding her. Yinghua, Guiyuan, and Ailan were busy with their cleaning tasks, chatting about how quickly time had passed in the palace. As they worked, one of them checked on Maomao, who was deep in her own work. They began to discuss a chilling rumor about a mysterious spirit supposedly haunting the rear palace. The story goes that one night, a maid saw a girl dressed in white, gliding through the shadows, and thought she was a ghostly spirit, possibly a yokai. Maomao was working on making a medicine to help the other servants endure the cold when a maid named Lan came by and asked what she was working on. Maomao explained the purpose of the medicine, and Lan, impressed by Maomao's skills, offered her help in any way she could, admiring Maomao's hard work. Curious, Maomao asked Lan if she'd heard about the spirit sighting. Lan hadn't seen anything herself, but she decided to ask around. Her friend mentioned that strange sightings had been happening lately and that each night, the spirit supposedly appeared in the east, performing a white moon dance under the moonlight. Maomao found the story intriguing but wondered if it was just a rumor. She reminded herself not to be spooked, assuring Lan that they likely had nothing to fear.
Are you sure about that?
Still, her curiosity got the better of her, so she paid a visit to the palace doctor to discuss recent events. Despite some past tension, he treated her kindly. During her visit, Jin interrupted her meal, prompting Maomao to wonder why he always seemed to be around. She suspected he held a higher position than he let on, given how often he roamed the palace. Jin, slightly amused by her curiosity, asked if Maomao knew of any remedies for sleepwalking beyond regular medicine. Maomao promised to look into the spirit sightings as well, sensing there might be a connection. Gao Shun, Jin's assistant, escorted her away, gently advising her not to look down on Jin's intentions. He then introduced her to concubine Fuyu, a graceful dancer who was set to be given as a reward to a military officer. The doctor explained that Fuyu, highly skilled in dance, had faltered during a recent performance and had since been haunted by anxiety, which had led to her sleepwalking. The emperor, disappointed, had lost interest in her. Maomao and Gao Shun discreetly observed Fuyu, noting her delicate demeanor. Maomao, ever observant, compared her to a cotton rose, a flower that changes form with the seasons. Curious about the connection to the ghost story, Maomao asked Lan if Fuyu's nighttime walks had been mistaken for the spirit sightings. Lan confirmed that Fuyu was often seen moving about from the northern wing, hinting at an eerie resemblance to the spirit. Later, Maomao met with Jiao, one of the emperor's favored consorts, to discuss the situation. Maomao explained that Fuyu's sleepwalking was likely triggered by stress, particularly the distress of being treated as a mere reward and not valued for her talents. She shared a story she once heard of a girl at a brothel who had suffered something similar. The girl had been admired for her beauty and talent, but after being rejected by a young man she loved, she fell into despair. No one else pursued her after that, leaving her isolated and vulnerable. Over time, her confidence faded, and she began sleepwalking, like she was living a dream she couldn't control. Maomao speculated that Fuyu felt similarly trapped, avoiding people and staying confined to her quarters. Over the following days, Jiao began to notice that Maomao seemed preoccupied. Maomao's concern for Fuyu's fate was genuine. She couldn't shake the image of Fuyu being handed over to the military officer like an object. She and Jiao watched quietly as Fuyu finally reunited with the officer, leaving the palace for what would be her new life. Maomao could only hope it was a better future for her, though she still felt a pang of worry. Just as Maomao was reflecting on Fuyu's fate, she was summoned to Jiao's quarters, where she encountered a strange man. He had a request specifically for Maomao. This mysterious man, sensing her growing reputation within the palace, approached her with a serious look, hinting that her skills were needed for something beyond the palace walls. Maomao, intrigued and cautious, couldn't help but wonder what new challenge awaited her. The palace maids were gossiping about how Lady Lihua refused to eat the meals that Maomao brought her. They complained that Lihua preferred luxurious food and looked down on the simple dishes Maomao provided. As Maomao listened, she reflected on why she'd been tasked to care for Lihua in the first place. Recently, after Maomao had inspected the emperor's food for poison, he had asked her to look after Lihua, who had been in poor health. A few days ago, Maomao had checked Lihua's food carefully, ensuring it was free of poison. As she was about to leave, the emperor suddenly stopped her. Surprised, she wondered why he would ask her to stay, since he rarely spoke to her directly. When she asked if he had a request, he replied that he wanted her to check on Lihua and monitor her health closely. He mentioned that he had sent some food for Lihua, but her maid, Nia, had turned it away. Maomao found it strange that Lihua's own servants were rejecting meals prepared under the emperor's orders. Later, she discussed the situation with Lan, suspecting that Lihua might still be suffering from lingering effects of the poison. Determined to help, Maomao went to the palace kitchen to prepare a mild, nutritious meal that would help Lihua's recovery. But every time she tried to serve the food, Lihua's maids turned her away, criticizing her for not understanding what luxurious food meant. They scoffed at her meals, calling them low class and insisting that only rich, heavy dishes would be suitable for someone of Lihua's status. Maomao, however, knew that such food would be too harsh for Lihua's weakened body. She repeatedly returned to the kitchen, each time preparing a meal that was gentle yet nourishing. Yet, every time she approached Lihua's rooms, she faced rejection from the maids, who believed that Maomao's food was beneath Lihua. Frustrated but determined, Maomao refused to give up and continued trying. Eventually, with Jin's intervention, the maids reluctantly allowed Maomao to serve Lihua her meal. As Lihua tasted the food, she managed to eat a little. But it was clear she still had a long road to recovery. The maids blamed Maomao, accusing her of disrupting the environment and causing unnecessary fuss.
What? Bro, what are you talking about, man?
Despite their complaints, Jin noticed Maomao's dedication and subtly encouraged the maids to give her a chance. One day, as Maomao observed Lihua closely, she noticed something odd about her appearance. A strange, pale makeup covered Lihua's face, and Maomao realized that it was likely contributing to her poor health. Furious, she approached one of Lihua's maids, who had applied the makeup, and slapped her. Taking the makeup, Maomao poured it over the maid's hand, revealing that it contained a poisonous powder that could be absorbed through the skin. She ordered the maid to wash her face immediately, scolding the others for their negligence and demanding that they clean up the room. As Maomao continued to care for Lihua, she guided the ladies in waiting on proper practices, ensuring that Lihua was no longer exposed to the toxic makeup. The maid who had applied it was sent to confinement as punishment, and a eunuch who had retrieved the powder faced disciplinary flogging. In a quiet moment, Lihua asked Maomao why she continued to help her, asking if Maomao was just prolonging her misery. Maomao replied that Lihua had the choice to stop eating. But the fact that she continued meant that she still wanted to live. With Maomao's persistence, Lihua's health slowly improved. Over the next 2 months, she regained enough strength to stand and walk again. Before Maomao left her care, Lihua asked her if she thought she'd ever be able to bear children again. Maomao replied that it might be possible, though she couldn't guarantee it. Lihua seemed disheartened, realizing that the emperor's affection seemed more directed toward Jiao than her. But Maomao whispered a suggestion, advising her to make use of her natural charm to rekindle the emperor's interest. Lihua gave a small nod, seemingly understanding the subtle encouragement Maomao offered. As Maomao left Lihua's quarters, she overheard whispers of someone else in the palace who might be suffering from a curse. This piqued her curiosity, leaving her wondering about the secrets and strange ailments plaguing the royal court, and if there was yet another task awaiting her talents as an apothecary. A soldier cursed with a strange disease bursts into the courtyard, shouting in pain. His hands have become red and inflamed, a sight that fills him with fear. Unsure of how this happened, he searches for help. Nearby, Jin, a skilled swordsman, is practicing his moves with a friend named Basin. Afterward, he sits down with his assistant to check on her well-being, showing his caring side. Not far off, Maomao is busy gathering mushrooms in the forest. She's always loved foraging, and these mushrooms look particularly tasty. Feeling a sudden hunger, she gathers a few extra to cook later, hoping no one will catch her mid-harvest and question her. When she returns, she shares some delicious food her uncle sent with her friend Lan, who gratefully accepts the extra portions. Excited about her mushroom find, Maomao heads to the palace doctor to show him. He agrees they look fresh and suggests they cook them together. After a bit of preparation, they cook up a tasty dish, enjoying it together over laughter and conversation. But their peaceful meal is interrupted by the arrival of the cursed soldier. His hands, red and raw, tell a painful story. He tells the doctor that during his night shift of burning palace waste, an unusual, colorful flame flared up. When he looked down, his hands were covered in a red rash. Maomao examines the strange rash, intrigued. The doctor asks if she can make an ointment for the soldier, and she sets to work, thinking hard about the ingredients she'll need. As she prepares it, the soldier explains more about his night shifts and the strange incident that led to his condition. Maomao suspects the colorful flames could be linked to the dyes or chemicals used for palace fireworks and assures him that her ointment will help. At that moment, Jin arrives, and a servant hurries off to make him some tea. Jin asks Maomao to follow him to another room where medicinal tablets are stored. Together, they examine tablets that might help with the rash, each in various colors, wondering if these could hold some clues to what's causing the rashes around the palace. Afterward, he tasks Maomao with making some of the mushroom stew she shared with the doctor. She promises to bring it to him the next day. When Maomao is finally alone, she begins to think about the colored tablets and the mysterious rashes spreading around the palace. It all seems too coincidental. She wonders if the colors and the rash might be linked in some coded way. Returning to Jayakaiou's residence, she's greeted by her lady-in-waiting friends, who present her with a beautiful dress she'll need to wear for the upcoming garden party. Curious, she asks what the garden party is all about, and the maids explain that it's held twice a year, filled with entertainment, dancing, and delicious food. The maids also tell her that several of the emperor's concubines, including Lihua and Jayakayu, will be there, along with 2 others named Lishu and Aduo. Jayakayu advises Maomao to make an effort to look her best at the party, which means putting on a little makeup and covering up the faint freckles on her face. When Maomao asks if it's necessary, the maids insist that it's a mandatory event for everyone. Afterward, Maomao heads to her office to start preparing for the party. With a chill in the air, she decides to make some candy, using oranges to create a treat that not only tastes good but also warms anyone who eats it. As she cooks, a maid comes by, drawn by the delicious scent, and Maomao explains that this candy, when eaten, can generate warmth within the body. Hongmiang, another maid, drops in to see her, admiring a special underrobe Maomao has designed to stay warm during the party. Impressed, she asks if Maomao can make similar ones for the other maids. Maomao agrees, and by night, she cuts the fabric, stitching together the robes in the morning. After finishing her sewing, she cleans the queen's palace as part of her duties. With the garden party only 2 days away, Maomao decides to make a few more robes to ensure everyone will be comfortable. Meanwhile, news reaches Jin that efforts to cure the palace rashes have so far been unsuccessful. Troubled by this, he goes to visit the concubines, eventually stopping by Jayakayu's chambers. He notices that Maomao's freckles are missing, giving her a more polished appearance, which catches his eye. Surprised, he comments on her transformation, and Maomao confides that she often wears makeup, not to enhance her beauty but to make herself look plain and discourage unwanted attention. Touched by her story, Jin expresses regret for not helping her during a previous incident when she was kidnapped. Maomao brushes it off, saying she's okay. As a gesture of respect and care, Jin gifts her one of his hairpins. Puzzled, Maomao asks the other maids what it means when a man gives a woman a hairpin, but they simply smile knowingly. As the day of the garden party dawns, the queen herself arrives to see everyone. She admires the maids and servants, complimenting them on their appearance. To Maomao's delight, the queen even gives her a beautiful necklace, which makes her feel special. With a grateful heart, Maomao heads to the garden party, now officially underway. The garden party blooms with life as laughter, music, and the clinking of glasses fill the air. Beautifully dressed guests dance under the open sky, while tables are laden with delicious food. Maomao, wrapped in her warm underrobe and feeling the security of her necklace, finds herself enjoying the sights, sounds, and company around her, even if she's still a bit puzzled by the royal ways. The festival had begun, and Maomao and her friend Lan watched the festivities from behind a curtain, feeling the cold wind around them. Maomao was lucky to have a heating pad in her pocket, keeping her a bit warmer, but Lan shivered beside her. They peeked out to see performers dancing gracefully, capturing everyone's attention. The palace soldiers were also there, showing off their impressive combat skills. Among the guests were queens and their children, adding to the lively atmosphere. Lan pointed out the Empress Dowager to Maomao, whispering that she was the mother of both the emperor and his brother, though the brother was too ill to attend. As they continued watching, Maomao noticed 2 queens with their servants caught up in a heated argument. Curious, Maomao and Lan moved closer and found it was Jayakayu's ladies-in-waiting squabbling with Lihua's. Maomao, with her calm demeanor, intervened and quickly reminded one of Lihua's ladies of an incident they had shared in the past. The reminder worked, and the argument ended peacefully. Lan admired Maomao's patience, commenting on how she never seemed to get angry over small things. However, another dispute quickly caught Maomao's attention. This time, it was between the servants of 2 other concubines, Aduo and Lishu. Maomao learned that Aduo had served as a concubine for the longest time, while Lishu was a new, young addition. She also discovered that Lishu was Aduo's daughter-in-law, adding a new layer to the palace drama. Maomao couldn't help but think that Lishu looked surprisingly young, almost like a lost child wandering around the party. As the evening grew colder, some girls nearby started to shiver. Maomao offered them her heating pad, but they politely refused. Shortly afterward, a man approached Maomao and, to her surprise, gifted her a hairpin. Bewildered by the gesture, she tucked it away and rejoined Lihua and her group of ladies-in-waiting. Lihua, too, bestowed a hairpin upon her before leaving, adding to Maomao's growing collection of unexpected gifts. Jayakayu's ladies-in-waiting were a bit puzzled by how many items Maomao had received, unsure how Jayakayu herself would react to all the attention Maomao was getting. Jayakayu, standing at the forefront with the soldiers, appeared to hold a position of respect and authority. Maomao wandered to the main area of the party where a taste-testing event was about to begin. She observed the area, taking in the surroundings, when she was handed the first dish to try. As the palace taste tester, her job was to ensure the food was safe before it was served to the kings and queens. The dish tasted fantastic, and Maomao was pleased to find no signs of poison. The next dish she sampled was a warm soup, but as she finished it, the same man who had given her the hairpin whispered a warning: there was poison in this soup. Alarmed, Maomao discreetly left the area, her heart racing. Nearby, Jin, noticing the commotion, heard the news about the poison and rushed to investigate. One of the ministers, unaware of the warning, had tasted the soup and collapsed moments later. Jin found Maomao, who was still reeling from the discovery, and quickly grabbed her hand, insisting they go to the infirmary. As they hurried along, Maomao's face turned pale, and she pulled funny expressions that made Jin suspect the poison might already be affecting her. He guided her firmly, explaining she'd need to take medicine to flush the poison from her system. Reluctantly, Maomao followed his instructions, taking the emetic and vomiting to rid her body of the poison. Once she felt better, she reassured Jin she was okay but couldn't help feeling a little frustrated. Part of her had wanted to see if she could withstand the poison. Jin informed her that the minister who drank the soup had done so to see if Maomao was telling the truth, only to collapse shortly after. Calmly, Maomao handed Jin a bag containing more emetic agents and suggested they give it to the minister to help him recover. Now fully recovered herself, Maomao asked Jin to bring Lishu to her so she could discuss the incident with the poisoned soup. When Lishu arrived, Maomao noticed small red bumps on her arm, which made her suspicious. She deduced that Lishu was allergic to the mackerel they had eaten earlier at the party. The discovery led Maomao to realize that Lishu's meal must have been swapped with Jayakayou's dish. Lishu, puzzled, asked Maomao how she had figured this out. Maomao explained that she had observed Lishu's discomfort throughout the party, noticing her hesitation to eat the food. She also questioned why Lishu's taster had allowed her to eat something that didn't agree with her. In the palace, each queen and concubine had their own designated taster to ensure their meals were safe, so Maomao was curious why Lishu's taster hadn't done their job properly. Lishu's maid seemed tense and hesitant, and Maomao sensed she was hiding something. When questioned, the maid admitted she knew Lishu disliked mackerel, though she didn't expect it to cause an allergic reaction. Maomao advised the maid to use a specific tablet to relieve her stress, gently reminding her to be more careful in the future. Afterward, Jin placed his hand on Maomao's shoulder, a gesture of reassurance, but Maomao brushed it off, saying she had always been a bit delicate. Jin removed his hand, looking slightly embarrassed. She then said she would be leaving, only for Jin to ask why she had been suspicious of Lishu's taster from the start. Maomao replied that she could tell from observing the maid's behavior that something wasn't right. Leaving the party behind, Maomao sighed, feeling worn out from the day's events. Jin and his fellow officers were left contemplating whether this incident was connected to the strange colored tablets and the mysterious rashes that had appeared on the hands of palace workers recently. Maomao lay in bed, lost in thoughts of her father, wondering how he was doing. She had been granted a rare day off after the long night spent helping those affected by the poisoned food at the garden party. She'd been up all night ensuring everyone was treated, so her exhaustion was understandable. But as the morning turned to noon, Maomao pushed herself to get up. She wasn't one to spend a whole day resting, it made her restless. Determined to stay busy, Maomao found the queen and asked if she could help with anything, explaining that sitting idle didn't suit her. The queen mentioned that Jayakayou had been looking for her that morning and seemed to have some work involving planting seeds. Maomao's curiosity was piqued. Why would Jayakayou want to plant something? She wondered if it was an attempt to impress one of the maids. Intrigued, Maomao made her way to Jayakayou, asking if she could use the parlor. Jayakayou agreed, and Hong Yang, one of the attendants, escorted her to the area. Maomao was soon presented with a silver cup containing the same type of soup that had been sabotaged during the garden party. She inspected it carefully, noting that the silver hadn't changed color, a typical sign of poison. Still cautious, she asked Jin, who'd brought the cup, how he'd handled it. Jin assured her he had only touched it with a spoon and then sealed it in a bag. Maomao decided to investigate further, creating a powder that could reveal fingerprints. She sprinkled it over the bowl, revealing that 4 different people had touched it. Thinking aloud, she figured the first person might be the cook, the second the server, the third the official taster, and finally, the fourth, the unknown person who might have added poison. Maomao believed this mysterious 4th person must be an outsider, not someone from the palace, who had deliberately tampered with the dish. Digging deeper, Maomao suspected that Lishu's taste tester had switched the dishes to harass her without realizing one of them was poisoned. She believed this resentment came from the strained relationship between Lishu, who was once the previous emperor's concubine, and her ladies-in-waiting. Now that Lishu was set to marry her late husband's son, Maomao thought her maids might see her actions as inappropriate, fueling their grudge. Gao Shun, who listened to Maomao's theory, was skeptical about a lady-in-waiting having the nerve to bully a high-ranking concubine. But Maomao reminded him it was only a theory. She also revealed she'd protected Lishu's taste tester because she understood the pressures faced by palace servants. Taking this information, Gao Shun went to inform Jin, who was also feeling the weight of exhaustion from recent events. Jin suspected an insider involvement but was frustrated, still unable to solve the mystery of the boy's infected hands and the source of the strange cloth. The next morning, Maomao talked with Lan, who brought up the topic of hairpins and their significance in the palace. Lan explained that receiving a hairpin allowed a woman to leave the rear palace, provided she had an escort. To Maomao's surprise, this meant she could request to leave the palace, too. The idea of visiting her family sparked excitement within her. Word soon reached Haku that Maomao wanted to meet with him. Wondering what Maomao might ask, he approached her with caution. When they met, Maomao handed him a hairpin and asked if he could escort her on a visit home. Though reluctant at first, Haku eventually agreed after Maomao sweetened the offer by inviting him to a flower viewing event with 3 distinguished princesses, Maomao, Joka, and Perrin. This was a chance Haku couldn't resist. Meanwhile, Jin arrived at Jayakayu's quarters, only to learn that Maomao had already left the palace on a short trip to visit her family. Maomao and Haku traveled to the verdigris house, where Haku was soon swept away by one of the girls, eager to join Perrin at the flower viewing. Left on her own, Maomao chatted with the elderly proprietor, who was curious about why Maomao had been absent for months. In thanks for her help with Haku, Maomao gave the proprietor a portion of her palace salary. The proprietor advised Maomao to visit her father while she had the chance. Maomao soon found herself back with her father, catching him up on her strange life at the rear palace and the events that had led her there. They spent the day reminiscing, and as night fell, Maomao drifted off to sleep, feeling a sense of peace. Her father watched over her, still puzzled by her journey from their district to a place of such high status in the palace. Maomao awoke in her childhood home, taking in the familiar sights and scents. She thought of her father, who had likely gone out to the fields to gather herbs, a daily routine he loved despite his age. Smiling, Maomao left the house and made her way to the fields, where she saw her father bent over his crops, his hands working steadily. She admired his dedication and strength, though she couldn't help worrying about how hard he pushed himself. While she was watching, a young girl suddenly appeared and tugged Maomao's hand, urgently asking her to follow. Confused but curious, Maomao went with her, soon arriving at a small house where she found 2 people lying unconscious, a young boy and a girl, both looking unwell. The boy wasn't breathing, and the girl's breaths were quick and shallow. The girl guiding her looked panicked, as did Maomao's uncle, who had also been woken by the commotion. Maomao quickly knelt by the boy, carefully checking his throat for any blockages, then began pressing on his stomach in hopes of clearing whatever might be blocking his airways. When that didn't work, she leaned down and gave him mouth-to-mouth resuscitation, breathing into his mouth to help him. She instructed the others to bring water, but then had an idea and called for charcoal instead. It was a chaotic morning, and she couldn't help but think how strange it was to be thrown into such a serious situation so early. With her swift actions, she managed to stabilize both the boy and the girl. Maomao's helpers, relieved, went to make tea for everyone, leaving her a moment to look around the room, searching for clues about what had caused their condition. The young girl returned and handed Maomao the charcoal she had asked for, which Maomao mixed with a few herbs. She wrote a quick note on a text plate, asking the girl to find her father. Her father soon arrived with a collection of herbs, and together they prepared a remedy for the injured boy and girl, combining Maomao's charcoal mixture with the herbs her father had brought. As the women helped administer the medicine, Maomao and her father shared theories on what might have happened. Maomao suspected they might have drunk something that caused their condition, maybe a mixture of liquids that didn't blend well and led to a toxic reaction. Her father nodded, mentioning that many liquids, when combined improperly, can be dangerous. After they were done, Maomao and her father visited an elderly woman for tea. They discussed the situation with her, trying to piece together more details. Maomao noticed the young girl outside the women's quarters and realized something strange. Though the boy didn't have money on him, his clothing hinted that he came from a wealthy family. He was also rather handsome, making Maomao wonder why he'd ended up in this situation. Could it be a murder attempt? Or was this a failed double suicide? Determined to find answers, Maomao returned to the boy's room, noticing that the door was slightly open. She stepped inside and found the young girl from before holding a knife, clearly ready to harm the unconscious boy. Startled, Maomao tried to stop her, and they struggled briefly until one of the women intervened. Calming down, the woman explained the young girl's motive. The boy was a known womanizer, and the young girl's older sister had been one of his victims. The girl had plotted revenge for her sister's suffering, driven by anger and pain. Realizing the situation, Maomao spoke with both the girl and her sister, acknowledging the wrong that had been done but also warning the girl about the danger of her actions. Later, as Maomao and her father walked home, she reflected on how extreme the young girl's reaction was. She suspected this had indeed been a murder attempt, not a suicide pact as she'd initially thought. To unwind, Maomao decided to visit the town's bathhouse. There, she ran into Maomao, a friendly acquaintance, and they chatted together about life and the events that had unfolded in the district. The warm bath and light-hearted conversation helped Maomao relax, giving her a brief escape from the palace's pressures. The next day, Maomao returned to the palace with Haku.
もう帰っちゃうなんて残念だわ。
実に残念だ。
Upon arrival, she noticed Jin looking annoyed. He asked Maomao to meet him in the parlor, where he confronted her about her recent trip. Jin was upset that Maomao didn't understand the significance of the hairpin he'd given her. In the palace, a hairpin symbolized a lot more than she'd realized. Jin was also displeased that she had chosen to leave with Haku instead of him. Maomao, trying to explain, joked that she had offered Haku a night of blissful dreams, suggesting something that left Jin visibly irritated, thinking they had shared an intimate moment. Annoyed, Maomao left the room, only for Hong Yang to appear and playfully bonk her on the head for stirring up trouble. Jayakayu, overhearing the whole exchange, couldn't contain her laughter, amused by the situation and Jin's reaction. Back in her quarters, Maomao pondered the mysteries of the palace and her father's world, realizing how different her life was becoming. As she prepared for the day, she smiled, thinking about all the little intrigues she'd encountered. Despite the chaos, she felt a sense of purpose growing within her and knew there was much more to discover in the palace's ever-turning web of secrets. Inside the palace, festivities were still underway, and the soldiers were enjoying themselves with food and drink. One soldier, Kunin, had been drinking heavily and ordering more, which caught the attention of those around him. People whispered about how much he'd changed, becoming more reckless with his drinking habits. Some even remarked that his taste seemed to have shifted lately. Meanwhile, Jin, who was seated nearby, appeared oddly playful, almost like a child clinging to his favorite toy. Dao Shun, seated next to him, couldn't help but find his behavior strange. "Don't forget you're here to work," Gao Shun reminded him, though Jin seemed lost in his thoughts. As they exchanged words, the queen passed by, laughing, and joked with Jin about his mood. Their lighthearted moment was interrupted when a man burst into Jin's quarters, breathlessly delivering the news that something terrible had happened to Kunin. Jin, Gao Shun, and Maomao rushed to where Kunin was lying still. Kunin, a robust older soldier who had served the palace for years, was found unresponsive, his face pale. The news shocked them all. Maomao, examining his body, noted that his breathing had stopped, and she pondered what might have caused it. She couldn't believe he'd simply died from drinking too much. After all, Kunin was known for his ability to handle his liquor. Later, in a private room, they discussed what had happened. Maomao suggested that excessive drinking might have damaged Kunin's organs, though she admitted it was hard to believe he'd die from that alone. Witnesses at the party claimed he'd been drinking heavily, but Kunin was no stranger to large quantities of alcohol. He could handle his drink like a warrior, able to down an entire jar without issue, so it seemed strange that it would kill him now. The next morning, Jin and Gao Shun informed Jayakayu and Maomao of Kunin's death. Though Maomao wasn't deeply saddened, she explained the potential risks of alcohol overconsumption, suspecting there was more to the story. Jin, however, wasn't convinced that Kunin's death was an accident. He believed someone might have been involved and handed Maomao a sample of the alcohol Kunin had been drinking. Maomao took a sip to test for poison. She didn't detect anything lethal, but she noticed the drink tasted strangely sweet, yet somehow salty as well. Something was off. Jin, observing her, noted that Kunin had always enjoyed both sweet and spicy flavors.
糖尿になりますね。
思い出話を現実に戻すな。
But this drink seemed different. They moved to Jin's quarters to dig further into the mystery. Gao Shun provided Maomao with a report, and Jin showed her the broken bottle from which Kunin had been drinking. Maomao examined the bottle closely, licking a trace of the liquid and finally piecing together the truth. The drink contained an excessive amount of salt. She explained that while Kunin likely hadn't noticed the high salt content, it was the overload that had affected him fatally. Jin questioned how Kunin hadn't tasted the saltiness, but Maomao suggested he might have lost his sensitivity to salt due to immense stress or poor diet, possibly linked to the grief over losing family members. Maomao concluded that someone had indeed tampered with Kunin's drink, adding the extra salt. However, she emphasized that finding the culprit wasn't her responsibility. As Gao Shun left the room, Maomao noticed Jin wearing a talisman, a sign of mourning. Jin revealed that Kunin had been an important person in his life. As a token of gratitude for her help, he presented Maomao with a small gourd of alcohol, which led to an amusing conversation about the palace's growing expenses.
20歳になるまで禁止せよ。
Their conversation was interrupted by a frantic message about a woman found drowned. The palace doctor and Maomao were informed, but Maomao chose not to touch the body, explaining that her apothecary master had always instructed her to avoid handling the dead, lest she start thinking of humans as potential medicinal ingredients. She joked that if she wasn't careful, she'd start grave robbing next. Later, in Jin's quarters, the group gathered to discuss the drowning incident. Maomao wasn't sure if the woman's death was suicide or murder. As she walked back, her thoughts wandered, reflecting on the idea of fate and death. Passing a garden plant, she thought about all the unusual cases she'd been involved with lately. Out of the blue, she asked Jin if she'd be able to withstand poison if she ever had to consume it for duty. Jin looked at her, puzzled by the strange question, and Maomao left without explaining further. Maomao later learned rumors were circulating about the drowning victim, who had reportedly left a suicide note, leading officials to classify her death as a suicide and close the case. However, Maomao couldn't shake her doubts. She'd also heard that the drowned maid had attended the garden party where poison had been involved, and something didn't sit right. Back in Jin's quarters, Gao Shun delivered another piece of news. They'd identified the person responsible for the mysterious case involving burned hands and strange colored wood tablets. It was Ming, the head lady in waiting at the Garnet Pavilion and servant to Lady Ah Duo. Jin sat back, pondering the puzzle in front of him. One incident after another seemed to link back to someone with a hidden agenda, and he knew he'd need Maomao's sharp insights to unravel what lay beneath the palace's gilded surface. Maomao and her friend Lan were discussing the recent death of Lady Ah Duo's servant, which many thought was a suicide. Lan shared a rumor she'd heard. Lady Ah Duo might soon be replaced by a younger concubine. Maomao suspected Ah Duo's position was at risk because she couldn't produce children, a crucial expectation in the rear palace. She wondered if Lady Lihua might also face a similar fate if she failed to have a baby. After sharing some leftovers from a recent tea party with Lan, Maomao returned to the Jade Pavilion, only to find that they were holding another tea party, this time with Lady Lishu in attendance. Curious, she observed everyone's behavior, particularly the attitudes of Lishu's servants,
別に噛みついたりしないのにな。
wondering if they were still harassing her like before. During the party, Lady Jayakawa served Lishu a honey-flavored tea, but Lishu refused to drink it, looking uncomfortable. Maomao noticed Lishu's servants whispering about her refusal, seeming amused by her reluctance. Discreetly, Maomao signaled to Jayakawa that something might be wrong with the tea. Understanding, Jayakawa asked her servant, Ailem, to bring out hot ginger tea instead. Soon after, Jayakawa's ladies-in-waiting suggested Maomao rest, gently ushering her out. On her way back, Maomao ran into Jin,
話は終わってないんだが
who brought up the alleged suicide of Lady Ah Duo's servant. Maomao shared her thoughts, and Jin then assigned her to help with some tasks at the Garnet Pavilion, where Ah Duo resided. Curious about the pavilion and its residents, Maomao greeted Lady Ah Duo, and was then directed by Ah Duo's head lady-in-waiting, Ming, to a book room to air out the books and handle other chores. While working, Maomao closely observed her surroundings, wondering if the Garnet Pavilion could hold the mastermind behind the poison incident that had targeted Lishu. As she worked, Maomao thought through Ming's potential motives, considering what she could gain from targeting Lishu. Her investigation led her to learn that Ming had a history involving honey, which seemed suspicious. Later, while wandering near the Garnet Pavilion, Maomao noticed Lishu's presence there and made a mental note of it before reporting back to Jin. Although she hadn't found solid evidence, she told Jin that Ming might be the culprit. To thank her for her efforts, Jin playfully offered Maomao honey as a reward, attempting to feed it to her from his fingers.
結構です。他の方に差し上げてください。
Embarrassed, Maomao refused, uncomfortable with his teasing gesture. Just as she was trying to compose herself, Lady Jayakawa arrived and scolded Jin for his odd behavior, which gave Maomao a reason to slip away. Determined to get to the bottom of Lishu's reluctance to drink honey, Maomao found Lishu and asked her about it. Lishu explained that several nurses had warned her that honey could be life-threatening, so she always avoided it. When Lishu's ladies-in-waiting started scolding Maomao for asking improper questions, Maomao stood her ground, telling them to bring any complaints directly to Jin. She knew the ladies-in-waiting didn't truly care for Lishu's well-being. Maomao then asked Lishu about her relationship with Ming before taking a stroll through the palace with Gao Shun, hoping to find more information on past incidents in the rear palace. She mentioned wanting a place to access old records, and Gao Shun led her to the court library where she could search for more answers. As she pored over the records, Maomao uncovered an interesting piece of history. Lady Ah Duo had been raised alongside the current emperor as a foster sibling. She also learned that her own adoptive father, Dr. Liu Men, had once helped Ah Duo give birth to her son. This discovery left Maomao deep in thought, questioning her father's role in the palace's tangled past. Maomao arrived at the Garnet Pavilion to deliver a message to Lady Aduo. As she entered, she noticed Ming, Aduo's head lady-in-waiting, who seemed to be preparing to leave. Maomao greeted Ming and asked if they could talk. Glancing around, Maomao saw that Ming had packed her belongings, so she curiously asked when Ming was planning to depart. Without hesitation, Maomao told Ming that she knew Lady Aduo was being ordered to leave the pavilion to make room for a younger, high-ranking concubine. Maomao also brought up a sensitive issue, Aduo's inability to bear children. She pressed Ming for more information about the day Aduo attempted to give birth, explaining that this was personal to her, as her own father, Dr. Luo Men, had been involved in the delivery. Maomao mentioned the tragedy of Aduo's child's early death and bluntly asked Ming if she felt any guilt for failing to care for the child, especially when Aduo was unwell at the time. Ming, taken aback, listened as Maomao theorized about the cause of the child's death. She dismissed the common belief that face powder was to blame, instead producing a box containing a flour and syrup. Maomao explained that certain flours and syrups contain harmful substances that can be dangerous for children if ingested. Due to the mishaps during Aduo's difficult labor, Maomao continued, her father, Dr. Luo Men, had been banished from the rear palace. Maomao then dropped a bombshell. She knew that someone had informed Ming about the poisonous flour early on, yet Ming had covered it up to avoid Aduo discovering the truth. Maomao suspected that Ming was trying to hide her role in the child's tragic fate. Maomao also revealed that it was Li Shu who had initially informed Ming about the honey and poison risks. Li Shu and Aduo had shared a close bond, and when Li Shu confided in Ming about her own childhood issues with honey, Ming harshly dismissed her, forcing her away from the pavilion. Later, when Li Shu became a concubine herself, Ming feared her past mistakes might be exposed. To keep the secret hidden, Ming poisoned Li Shu's soup at the garden party. Ming listened in silence as Maomao presented her findings. She admitted she idolized Aduo deeply and had been devastated by her role in the child's death. Knowing she couldn't hide the truth any longer, Ming accepted Maomao's ultimatum. The following day, Maomao went to Jin's quarters to report the outcome of her investigation into Aduo and Ming. As night fell, Maomao climbed up to the wall surrounding the rear palace, seeking some quiet time to reflect. To her surprise, Lady Aduo approached, joining her in silent contemplation.
Care to join me for a drink?
Is that Bruce? Give me!
They exchanged a few words, both reflecting on all that had happened, before Aduo quietly walked away. As Maomao prepared to leave, she tripped, but Jin suddenly appeared, catching her before she could fall. They shared an unexpectedly intimate moment in the moonlight, both caught off guard by their closeness. The next morning, Maomao attended the farewell ceremony for Lady Aduo. Watching Aduo step down from her rank was bittersweet, but Maomao respected her grace in departure. She handed Jin Aduo's ceremonial crown and couldn't help but notice a similarity between Jin and Aduo. For a moment, she wondered if he'd somehow been connected to the tragic story of Aduo's child. However, she let the thought go when everyone's attention shifted to Li Shu, who was running toward Aduo in a final, emotional farewell. Later, in Jin's quarters, Gao Shun brought him documents with information about Ming's family and connections. As Jin reviewed the papers, his gaze fell on a note that bore Maomao's name, his expression turning thoughtful. Jin stood before the palace audience, explaining what happened to Ming's family after her execution. He revealed that her relatives faced severe punishment and lost their wealth due to their connection with her crimes. Jin mentioned that he now had a list of everyone in Ming's family, as well as their associates, including the group that had once kidnapped Maomao. He was torn about whether to hide this information or not. If he kept it secret, Maomao might remain tied to the palace, but he wasn't sure if that would be fair to her or if it was truly what she would want. Meanwhile, Maomao and Lan were talking with Haku about a recent mass dismissal of palace staff, most of whom had connections to Ming's family. Worried about her future, Maomao decided to confront Jin about it. She went straight to him, asking what would happen to her now that people linked to Ming's family were being removed. Jin handed her the document listing all the connections and alliances, including hers. When she asked if she would lose her position, Jin didn't answer directly. Instead, he asked her what she wanted. Maomao admitted that she liked her life at the Jade Pavilion and didn't want to lose it, but she also didn't want to seem desperate to keep her job. So, she said she'd do whatever he advised, hoping he would let her stay. However, despite her efforts, Maomao ultimately lost her position and had to leave the palace, returning to the pleasure district.
交渉失敗。Maomao解雇。
Gao Shun noticed Jin's frustration over her departure and realized that Jin hadn't forced her to stay because he wanted her to have a choice. Back in the district, Maomao was welcomed warmly by one of the 3 princesses of the Verdigris house. The princesses planned to take her to a nobility banquet, and Maomao noted that the money she'd saved from her time at the palace allowed her to avoid being sold into servitude.
すぐに客を取ってくれてもいいんだよ。
At the banquet, the three princesses performed gracefully for the nobles, while Maomao moved about, assisting them. Among the guests, she noticed a familiar face, Jin, who looked unexpectedly gloomy. When she approached, he asked her why she had fled the palace and why she was now dressed like a courtesan. Maomao explained that she was merely working to make a living and didn't take on personal clients. Jin, visibly relieved, asked if he could buy her. Maomao laughed at the idea, teasing that he was the one who'd forced her to leave in the first place. Jin then questioned why she'd wanted to leave her palace life behind. Maomao responded with a smirk, telling him that her only regret was not being able to experiment with poisons in her work, a fact that made Jin chuckle. He found her obsession with poisons amusing and called it a ridiculous desire. Their playful exchange drew some curious glances from the nearby guests, intrigued by the chemistry between them. Afterward, the three princesses couldn't resist asking Maomao about her relationship with Jin, but she brushed it off, claiming he was just an acquaintance from the palace. Later, back at the Verdigris house, Maomao helped Grams, the elderly caretaker, with some tasks. Grams asked Maomao to look in on a patient, recognizing her skills from her time at the palace. That evening, as Maomao bathed in the house's warm bath, she found herself reflecting on her life in the rear palace and the strange experiences she'd had there. Grams joined her, and the two chatted about Maomao's plans to pay off her debts. Grams hinted that if Maomao wanted to, she might find a way to return to the palace. Afterward, Maomao went outside for a moment alone, pondering her next steps and what her future might hold. Feeling a mix of nostalgia and uncertainty, she eventually returned to her adoptive father's home, seeking comfort in familiar surroundings. The next morning, to her surprise, Jin and Gao Shun appeared at Graham's workplace. Jin presented Grams with a briefcase filled with money, hinting at his intention to support Maomao's return to the palace. For Maomao, he brought a peculiar gift, a strange plant. Amused, Maomao looked from Jin to the plant, realizing he was making a rather grand gesture. Jin's intention was clear, he wanted her back, and he would go to great lengths to make sure Maomao knew her worth, whether in the palace or outside it. Jin attends a meeting with the emperor where he reflects on his role and skills. He's determined to serve the emperor until he finds a chance to carve his own path. Meanwhile, Maid helps Maomao prepare for work by doing her makeup. Perrin and Joka join them, and they ask Maomao if she can bring more customers to her new job. Maomao leaves the Verdigris house and heads back to her father Liuomen's home, reflecting on the twists her life has taken. When Maomao arrives, she confides in Liuomen about her uncertainty regarding what to bring to the rear palace. Liuomen advises her to leave behind her mortar, pestle, and notebook to avoid appearing suspicious, but suggests she might have a chance to bring them later. That night, as Maomao sleeps beside her father, she continues to reflect on her journey. The next morning, Maomao and the others say their goodbyes, and Maomao sets off in a carriage. On the way, she blames Jin for all the attention she's receiving. They arrive at Jin's home, but Maomao is upset to learn she'll be working there instead of the rear palace.
俺の家だ。
なぜ
Gao Shun informs her that she can't return to her old job since she was fired. Suiron, Jin's attendant, introduces herself and gives Maomao a tour of the outer court. After setting up her room, Maomao reunites with Jin and the others. Jin tells Maomao she won't be doing servant labor anymore and encourages her to take the court lady exam. The next morning, Maomao visits Suiron and discovers that Suiron prefers to handle Jin's personal tasks herself. Maomao and Suiron go to see Jin, where Maomao notices Jin's casual demeanor and muscular physique. It becomes clear why only Suiron and Gao Shun are allowed in Jin's quarters. Jin offers Maomao a new room, but she insists on one with a stable. Realizing her intentions, Jin refuses to give her one. Gao Shun continues showing Maomao around, and she hopes she can remember everything. During their tour, they bump into Suiron, who asks Maomao to deliver some charcoal to Jin's office. Afterward, Maomao notices a group of court ladies who are clearly unhappy with her. They challenge her and question her connection to Jin. When Maomao sarcastically asks if they're jealous, one of them slaps her. Realizing her mistake, Maomao quickly offers them answers to their questions and even reveals a burn injury she caused herself. Toman leaves, and Jin overhears the conversation, reminding Maomao to keep studying for the court lady exam. The next day, Maomao takes the exam, but when she fails, Jin asks why. Maomao responds with a sharp question of her own: why would he think she'd pass? Stupid! In the end, Maomao becomes Jin's personal servant. While walking through the outer court, she spots several interesting plants and wanders into an area she shouldn't be in. A court lady warns her to leave, but Maomao catches a strange scent that reminds her of the military. Meanwhile, a mysterious figure wearing a monocle watches her from a distance. Later, two men meet in secret, exchanging a strange item under the cover of night. A young woman was escorted with great ceremony by her attendants to take her seat on the throne. Elsewhere, Lady Jayakawa was brimming with excitement over Maomao's recent accomplishments and shared her joy with her confidante, Hong Yang. Meanwhile, in the outer court, Suiron questioned Maomao about why she wasn't attending to her office duties. Maomao quickly headed back to her office, where she found Jin and Gao Shun waiting. Jin informed Maomao that a new pure consort had arrived at the Garnet Pavilion, and the palace officials wanted Maomao to serve as a teacher to all 4 high-ranking concubines. Surprised, Maomao handed Jin her invoice, gathered her teaching materials, and accompanied him and Gao Shun to the teaching location. As they walked, many young ladies gazed admiringly at Jin, flocking around them. Jin gently reminded them that only the high-ranked concubines were permitted to enter the pavilion. Maomao playfully used his words to distract him from noticing the true nature of her teaching equipment. Arriving at the event, Maomao spotted Jayakawa, Lishu, and Aduo along with their attendants, and she offered some kind words to the loyal ladies in waiting who had accompanied them. The new concubine, Lady Lulan, also caught Maomao's attention with her regal yet aloof demeanor. Maomao began her lesson, presenting each concubine with their materials. While Lihua and Jayakawa showed enthusiasm for her teachings, Lishu seemed startled by the lessons, and Lulan appeared uninterested. During her teaching, Maomao noticed Jin eavesdropping behind the door. Amused, Jin asked her what she was teaching, but Maomao only teased him, suggesting he should ask the emperor if he wanted to know. Later that night, Maomao heard guards patrolling the area. Although tempted to investigate, she decided against it, mindful of Suiron's possible disapproval. We shift to the guard's perspective, where a monocle-wearing man named Lakan observed the aftermath of a burned building. When asked if he'd discovered anything, he replied that he hadn't found anything of significance. Briefly, we glimpse an object he had exchanged with someone in an earlier encounter, adding a touch of intrigue to his investigation. The following day, Maomao was tidying Jin's office and noticed him working diligently. Gao Shun entered and presented her with a warm coat, explaining that it was a gift from Jin. Grateful, Maomao strolled through the palace gardens, admiring the plants, when she spotted Haku speaking with another gentleman. She greeted him, noting that Haku seemed especially motivated these days, likely due to his blossoming feelings for Perrin, one of the celebrated sisters of the Verdigris house. Maomao informed Haku of her new teaching role, and he mentioned his ongoing investigation of the burned structure nearby. Ever curious, Maomao decided to explore the area, despite Haku's mild annoyance. As she examined the ruins, she reflected on the palace's turbulent and peaceful moments throughout its history. To her surprise, Maomao found a strange item that Lakan had exchanged with the other gentleman earlier, a unique smoking pipe. She immediately made connections with other clues in the area, forming a theory about what had caused the fire. Eager to test her idea, she headed to a nearby warehouse, with Haku reluctantly trailing behind. Inside, she requested to use a few items she found, and with the help of one of Haku's friends, she began constructing a small device outside. She warned Haku to keep his distance since her experiment would result in an explosion. Ignoring her, Haku stayed close by and ended up with minor burns when the device ignited. Maomao quickly explained to him what had likely caused the warehouse to explode and advised him to inform the warehouse workers to prevent future incidents. Back in her quarters, Maomao carefully examined the smoking pipe. She found it strange that a simple warehouse woman would possess such a rare item and decided to clean it thoroughly to investigate further. Later, the scene shifts to a lively dining house where a wealthy-looking man sat in the corner, sulking over some unknown trouble. His mood cast a shadow, but his presence hinted at another layer of mystery in Maomao's already complex world. A group of men were gathered, gossiping about Haku's ongoing investigation into a burned warehouse. Their whispers caught the attention of Lakan, who overheard them and stepped in, asking for any useful information they might have. Meanwhile, Gao Shun visited Maomao and handed her a scroll detailing an unusual case involving pufferfish. He explained that a former colleague, Lakan, had informed him of a recent incident where a bureaucrat had eaten a raw pufferfish dish and fallen into a coma. The twist, Gao Shun continued, was that the cook insisted he hadn't used pufferfish in the dish at all, only a different type of fish. Curiously, both the bureaucrat and another man with a similar experience were known for their love of exotic foods, especially pufferfish. Suspicious, Maomao asked Gao Shun if he could dig up more information on these cases so she could investigate. Before she could dive deeper, Jin entered the room, interrupting her train of thought. Annoyed but intrigued, she decided to leave without discussing it, leaving Jin a bit disappointed. The following day, Gao Shun brought her the cook's notebook, which detailed every meal the bureaucrat had received. As she pored over the notes, Jin interrupted again, so Maomao decided to let him in on her investigation. While Jin was pampered by Suiron, Maomao discussed the timeline of the incident with Gao Shun, noting that it had happened a week prior. She deduced that the cook probably used winter vegetables in the dish and, with Gao Shun's help, learned that seaweed had also been included, a favorite of the bureaucrat. With these clues, Maomao asked to visit the cook's kitchen. Before heading there, Maomao met Basin, who joined her as they made their way to the bureaucrat's mansion.
よくは思われてなさそうだが、まあいいか。
Once in the kitchen, Basin warned her to follow his lead. Just as Maomao began her inspection, a man arrived and questioned their presence. Basin managed to convince him to let them proceed, and they learned from a servant that the man was the bureaucrat's younger brother. In the kitchen, Maomao discovered a pot filled with seaweed, which the servant assured her was not poisonous and was a favorite dish of his master. The younger brother eventually asked them to leave, and as they departed, Basin wondered why Maomao had backed down so easily. Maomao revealed that she hadn't given up. She had swiped a sample of the seaweed to investigate further. She suspected it had been imported from the south but needed to confirm its origin. Later, Maomao gathered with Jin and others to discuss her findings. She presented 2 dishes of seaweed for comparison, and Basin confirmed that one was indeed the southern-grown seaweed the bureaucrat loved but noted it wasn't typically harvested in winter. Maomao speculated that a merchant, aware of the bureaucrat's fondness for seaweed, had used this knowledge to profit, bringing a salted seaweed dish to him without warning of its risks. Maomao suggested they consider who might have advised the merchant to bring this specific type of seaweed, especially if someone intended harm. The following day, Gao Shun revealed that the bureaucrat's younger brother was indeed behind the pufferfish incident. He had learned of the seaweed's potential toxicity and deliberately served it, hoping to harm his brother. In her quarters, Maomao was disappointed she hadn't been able to sample the toxic seaweed herself. But her mood brightened when she remembered a thoughtful gift Jin had given her at the verdigris house. Her sudden cheerfulness startled Jin, who accidentally banged his head against the wall. Suiron tended to his wound as he vented his frustrations about a high-ranking military official who had been a family friend for years. Maomao advised him to let go of these matters and focus on the present. While sweeping her quarters later, Maomao had a sudden sense that something ominous was on the horizon. Meanwhile, Lakan arrived in Jin's office. The two had a tense conversation, with Jin accusing Lakan of holding a grudge because he'd chosen Maomao as his assistant. Lakan, however, revealed he had once been connected to a courtesan from the verdigris house and regretted never pursuing her. Alluding to past regrets, Lakan hinted at dark intentions he'd once harbored but left them unexplained. He then asked Jin if Maomao could help solve a new mystery surrounding a secret technique a former metalworker colleague had developed. Jin considered the proposal, but first, he wanted more details before allowing Maomao to take part. Outside, Maomao noted that it was raining unusually heavily, making her wonder if it was a sign of more turbulence to come. Jin called Maomao to his office to inform her about the unusual case involving a secret technique crafted by a late metalworker. Lakan had specifically requested her help, intrigued by the mysterious clues the metalworker had left for his 3 sons. Jin explained that after their father's death, the sons had each received a gift from him, along with a cryptic message mentioning a tea party. He handed Maomao a document containing their address and details about the case. Maomao noted that Basin would accompany her, and soon they were on their way. Upon arrival, the youngest brother greeted them and led them into the workshop, where the 2 older brothers waited. Maomao began investigating the space, taking in the various objects scattered around. As she examined the items, she quickly identified the eldest brother based on subtle details in his manner and appearance. Among the items in the workshop, Maomao noticed a strange mark on the surface of one particular object, sparking her curiosity. Just as she leaned in to inspect it, the eldest brother questioned her abilities, doubting whether she could truly solve their mystery. Basin defended her, stating that they'd need more specific information if they were to make progress. The brothers shared the basics they already knew and showed Maomao and Basin the gifts their father had left each of them. But tension simmered as they discussed the items, especially between the 2 older brothers and their youngest sibling. Each brother had specific complaints about the gifts, adding to the unease. Just then, their mother entered, scolding them for arguing and reminding them of their father's intentions. She served tea to everyone, and as Maomao sipped, she began to piece together a theory. Her attention drawn to the sunlight streaming in and the second brother's chest, which had a mysterious keyhole. Curious, Maomao examined the keyhole closely, suspecting something might be stuck inside. She asked the second brother about its history, listening carefully to his responses. Pondering all she'd observed, Maomao suddenly thought about the youngest brother's fishbowl, recalling if it had ever been placed on the marked shelf in the workshop. The youngest brother confirmed it had indeed been there, used in the past to hold their pet goldfish. Maomao asked for some water, filled the fishbowl, and positioned it so that the rose engraving faced her. When sunlight hit the glass, it refracted, casting a focused beam onto the chest's keyhole. Seeing the effect, Maomao instructed the second brother to use his key on the drawer. Although hesitant, he followed her suggestion, unlocking the drawer where they found a small box containing another key. Maomao quickly pieced together the puzzle, explaining how their father had hidden the keys and left clues that required them to work together to solve. She used the second key to unlock the remaining drawers, revealing several minerals and metals, which had been essential to their father's craft. The youngest brother nodded, understanding his father's intentions, but his older siblings seemed confused. They couldn't see the purpose behind their father's scheme. Before Maomao and Basin left, the youngest brother stopped his siblings, explaining that their father had wanted them to cooperate, not compete. The older brothers scoffed at the idea, assuming their father had always preferred the youngest. Patiently, the youngest son shared words their father had spoken about each of them, showing that he had loved and valued them all equally. As they were leaving, Maomao advised the youngest brother to visit Liu Men, her father, if he ever felt unwell, suggesting he might benefit from his expertise. Back at Jin's office, Lakan and Jin discussed the brothers and their family dynamics. Lakan shared some insights into the brothers' future plans and hinted at his personal interest in seeing the family's outcome. Intrigued, Jin then pressed Lakan for more details about his story involving a courtesan he'd once admired, but Lakan brushed him off, suggesting he look elsewhere for answers. Later, Jin and Maomao met up, exchanging a warm greeting. In a moment of spontaneity, Jin surprised her by asking if she'd do his makeup. Jin approached Maomao with an unusual request. He wanted her to apply makeup on him. Curious, he asked how she created her fake freckles, so Maomao shared a few tips. Jin then asked her to make him look like a completely different person, someone ordinary and far removed from the palace's elegance. Maomao promised she could whip up the needed mixture overnight, and Haku saw her working late to prepare it. The next morning, Maomao arrived at Jin's quarters, where she found him being pampered by Suiron. As she entered, she noticed Jin's expensive fragrance filling the air. Its rich scent made it impossible for him to blend in with commoners. Maomao remarked that she could tell a noble from an ordinary person just by their smell, and instructed Gao Shun to fetch Jin some unwashed clothes.
Brother,
Gao Shun soon returned with a smelly set of garments, and Maomao asked Jin to change into them.
Sniff, sniff, sniff. It could be a lot worse, but this will suffice.
Jin complied, revealing his muscular build, which Maomao noted as she prepared her disguise plan. She asked Suiron and Gao Shun to help alter Jin's appearance to make him look bulkier, even a bit slovenly. Out of mischief, she applied feminine makeup on him. But instead of looking ridiculous, Jin turned out surprisingly attractive. Realizing her initial plan wasn't working, Maomao opted for a different approach, transforming Jin into a rough-looking commoner. She added makeup to give him a grotesque appearance, darkened his hair, and rubbed it to give him a messy, unkempt look. To complete the disguise, she gave him an irritant to alter his voice and handed him cotton balls to change the shape of his face. By the time she was done, Jin was nearly unrecognizable.
Not like anyone else could have done a better job.
Before leaving, Gao Shun mentioned that Jin would be heading in Maomao's direction. Jin asked if Maomao could accompany him to avoid drawing attention, though Maomao tried to decline. Suiron convinced her to join, providing a simple disguise for Maomao as well. During their carriage ride, Jin asked Maomao to call him Jinka and complimented her new look. After Gao Shun dropped them off, they decided to go for a stroll. Jin revealed he was on his way to meet a friend at a nearby restaurant. Basin, acting as their discreet bodyguard, watched from a distance. Maomao was intrigued by a vegetable stand and wanted to buy something. But Jin reminded her that fashionable women didn't usually shop for groceries in the market. As they walked, Maomao thought about her father, Liu Men. Jin noticed her silence and urged her to talk. They stopped at a food stall, and Maomao bought 2 chicken skewers. As they enjoyed their snack, the scene shifted briefly to Gao Shun, who had just found Suiron applying persimmon tannin to a suitcase. They exchanged words about toys and possessions, with Suiron slyly implying that Maomao was Jin's current favorite toy. Gao Shun remarked that Jin didn't usually stay attached to one thing for long. Back with Jin and Maomao, it became apparent that Maomao was rushing their outing, clearly eager to part ways. Jin sensed this, feeling like she wanted to be rid of him. In an attempt to hold her interest, he brought up palace life, arguing that it was far better than life in the pleasure district. Maomao admitted that palace life was good, but she couldn't help worrying about her adoptive father's health. Jin was surprised, as he'd assumed Maomao cared only about medicine and poisons. Maomao explained that her adoptive father, Liu Men, was an expert apothecary and that he had studied abroad. Jin then asked if Liu Men was a eunuch, which Maomao confirmed, mentioning that he had received his title from the former emperor's mother. As they approached the inn and restaurant where Jin planned to meet his friend, Maomao realized why Jin had wanted a disguise in the first place. Once inside, Jin asked Maomao about the clients of the Verdigris house, but she explained that confidentiality prevented her from giving detailed answers. Undeterred, Jin pressed her on how a courtesan's value could be lowered. Although she found the topic unpleasant, Maomao explained that a courtesan's worth was tied to their purity. She went on to describe the differences in lifestyle between low and high-ranking courtesans, adding that a courtesan's value could plummet if they became pregnant. Jin was taken aback by this revelation, realizing how fragile a courtesan's status could be. The two shared a quiet moment, looking at each other with new understanding, as Jin saw another layer of Maomao's world, a world where people's worth was often as fleeting and fragile as their circumstances. Maomao tells Jin that getting a courtesan pregnant is the worst thing he could do, as it would ruin her value entirely. With that blunt truth said, Maomao leaves, while Jin heads into the building he intended to visit. Later that night, Maomao has a nightmare. In her dream, she recalls a man named Haku trying to stab her when she was just a baby. She wakes up with her heart pounding. The next day, Luomen asks Maomao if she can do him a favor at the Verdigris house. Once there, she is greeted by Perrin, who is happy to see her. Perrin and Old Granny argue briefly, and Maomao takes the opportunity to slip away from them. As she wanders, Old Granny spots her, and Perrin wonders aloud if Maomao is visiting the annex. Maomao eventually makes her way to the annex, where she visits a courtesan who is seriously ill. As she prepares medicine for the woman, Maomao reflects on how much worse her condition has become over time. The medicine she gives is from her father, but Maomao knows it's only a temporary fix. Elsewhere, a worker informs Old Granny that their regular male customers have arrived. Old Granny tells her male attendant to inform Maomao that a client is here. Back at the annex, Maomao thinks about Verdigris House's reputation and how the courtesan she's helping caught syphilis from a client in the past. Luomen had wanted to treat her, but the people at Verdigris House didn't trust him, so she kept working until she was locked away in the annex due to her illness. Maomao knows most courtesans are discarded once they can no longer make money for the house, but this woman's fate is unique. Just as she's about to burn some incense, a girl arrives at the annex to warn her that Lacan is around and that she should keep her distance from him. Lacan is a strange but regular customer at Verdigris House. Maomao notices the sick courtesan arranging pebbles on her bed, and it strikes her as odd. Later, Maomao comes to find Maomao, telling her that Lacan has left. Maomao and Maomao take a walk and talk about Lacan, Old Granny, and the ways of Verdigris House. While they're bathing, Maomao mentions she's getting older, prompting Maomao to ask when she plans to retire. Maomao says she wants to keep working for a while longer. Maomao wonders if Maomao is in love and reflects on how she herself has shut off that emotion. Jin and Gao Shun find Maomao later in the outer pavilion. Jin hands her a souvenir, a gift from a weirdo, and asks her to deliver it to Suiron. Maomao agrees and returns to her duties. When she gives the gift to Suiron mentions they'll have a vegetarian feast tonight, and that she can't have any meat or fish. Suiron notices Maomao spacing out and snaps her back to attention. Maomao had been lost in thought about the sick courtesan. Suiron then tells Maomao to ask Jin if she can use one of his empty rooms for her plants, but Maomao refuses, not wanting to impose. This leads them into a meaningful conversation about the differences between nobles and commoners, and the opportunities each one has. Afterward, Suiron sends Maomao to collect medicine from an establishment. While there, Maomao can't help but compare the place to the pharmacy in the rear palace. She dreams of rummaging through their medicine cabinets, and while caught up in her excitement, a court lady named Suiri approaches her, wondering what she's doing there. Suiri is there to resupply the guardhouse, and Maomao wonders about her connection to the military and why she seems to dislike her. Once Maomao delivers the medicine to Suiron, she continues her work, her mind drifting between thoughts of the medicine, Jin, and the mysterious happenings surrounding him. Jin and Gao Shun talk about Maomao's connection to Luo Men, who was once a eunuch. Lacan soon arrives, wanting to discuss the courtesan situation further with Jin. Lacan accuses Jin of stealing his prize and demands it back. He's willing to pay a high price but will drop the matter if Jin refuses. Lacan also mentions his daughter and her feelings, which leads Jin to realize that Lacan is Maomao's real father. Lacan leaves but warns that he will visit his daughter soon. Jin then sees Maomao nearby and tells her that Lacan wants to meet her. Maomao reacts negatively, and Jin quickly assures her he won't let Lacan bother her. Maomao thanks him, but deep down she's upset that Jin knows the truth about her parentage. Afterward, Maomao stumbles upon a beautiful plant garden and gets excited. Suiri finds her there and promises not to report her.
の手の汚れ、今から取ろうとしてたと認識していいかしら。
The two talk about the garden and Suiri's plans for it. Suiri jokes about planting something to make medicine that could resurrect people, which Maomao confronts her about, but Suiri brushes it off as a joke. They discuss Maomao's skills as an apothecary and Suiri's hopes for the garden's future. Gao Shun was going over the upcoming schedule with Jin, but Jin was distracted. He couldn't stop thinking about Maomao's reaction when she found out about Lacan. Gao Shun noticed and told Jin not to let that matter get in the way of his work. Meanwhile, Maomao was working when Haku showed up. He pulled her aside, wanting to talk without anyone overhearing. He explained that there had been a theft in a warehouse near the one that had burned down. Someone had stolen ceremonial tools, and Maomao questioned why they weren't better guarded. Haku sighed, explaining that there weren't any competent managers right now. The last one had died last year, and the current manager was sick with food poisoning. Maomao's ears perked up. It reminded her of an old case. She asked about the previous manager, and Haku mentioned that he had a sweet tooth, referring to Master Kunin. Haku then pulled out a smoking pipe, saying it had once belonged to someone who had gotten it from a court lady. The story went that the man had helped the court lady leave the castle, but her identity was a mystery since she had kept her face hidden. The only clues were that she was tall and smelled like medicine. Haku shrugged and said that these were the only odd occurrences he had noticed, and asked for Maomao's thoughts. They discussed the idea of coincidences, and Maomao began to suspect Suairi might be involved somehow. Their conversation was interrupted when they noticed Jin watching them from afar. Haku left, and Maomao followed Jin to his office. There, they talked about her relationship with Haku, and she shared the information about the stolen tools and the mysterious court lady. Maomao explained that all these strange events could either be accidental or deliberate traps, but they might also just be coincidences that didn't connect at all. Seeing that Maomao wasn't too enthusiastic about the case, Jin tried to lift her spirits by offering her an ox bezor, a rare medicinal gallstone, if she worked hard on solving it. Maomao's eyes lit up, and she set off to do some research at the archival building. At the archives, Maomao discovered that the person who had food poisoning was connected to the Board of Rites. Unsure what that meant, she asked a gentleman who worked there about it. He explained that the board dealt with ceremonies. As she wrote notes, Maomao thought about the poisoned official and Kunin's connection to ceremonies. She also began to wonder if the stolen tools and the smoking pipe could be part of a bigger picture. Ceremonies, it seemed, were key to understanding it all. Seeing her interest, the gentleman showed Maomao a diagram of the altar of the sapphire sky. He used to work for the Board of Rites, and he told her about his demotion after raising concerns about the altar's construction, particularly about the pillars. Maomao studied the blueprints and realized that if the metal parts holding those pillars broke, it could endanger the lives of the ceremonial conductor or any noble present. A hunch formed in her mind. This case might be linked to the three brothers from an older incident. Maomao asked if any ceremonies were happening soon, and the gentleman mentioned there was one today. Alarmed, Maomao rushed to the altar of the sapphire sky. When she arrived, a guard stopped her, telling her to leave. Desperate, Maomao tried to convince him to cancel the ceremony, but he wouldn't listen. She accused him of being in cahoots with whoever had tampered with the altar, which earned her a smack from his weapon. Despite the pain, Maomao got back up and pleaded to be let in, saying she was willing to take any punishment. Just then, Lakin appeared and told the guard to let her through. He said he'd take responsibility for whatever happened. Without a second thought, Maomao rushed inside. She made it just in time to push a nobleman out of the way before a pillar collapsed. She felt pain from her injuries but shrugged it off, thinking she could get stitched up later. Only then did she realize the person she had saved was Jin. Maomao, half joking, asked Jin if she could have the ox bezor now, but Jin was more concerned about her injuries. He asked what had happened to her face, and Maomao, still a bit dazed, wondered why Jin was even there. Before she could get an answer, she passed out, collapsing into Jin's lap. Jin gently picked her up and carried her away from the altar, determined to get her the care she needed. Maomao wakes up, bandaged all over, and finds herself in Jin's quarters. Suiron comes in, explains why she's there, and hands her a cup of tea. Soon after, Suiron escorts Maomao to a meeting that Jin is holding. Gao Shun and Basin are also in the room. Jin asks Maomao why she attended the ceremony and how she knew the pillar would fall. Maomao explains that someone intended to harm a noble there, connecting it to other incidents she had investigated. She also brings up the ceremonial item theft and talks about the metalsmith's possible involvement. She believes the metalsmith didn't understand the true purpose behind the request but knew a secret technique to create the special metal used for the pillars. Jin and Maomao briefly discuss what might happen to the metalsmith. Maomao then wonders why Jin was at the ceremony and imagines what might have happened if the plan had succeeded. She also briefly thinks about Suairi's involvement. Later, Suiron tells Maomao that Haku wants to speak with her. Haku informs Maomao that an investigation found Suairi's involvement, and that she died from consuming poison, confirmed by an autopsy. He says that no one else was involved, but Maomao refuses to believe Suairi acted alone. She returns to work with Suiron, contemplating whether Suairi would have really done this by herself. That night, Maomao heads to Jin's room and asks him to take her to the morgue. She wants to talk to the physician who performed Suayuri's autopsy. When they get to the morgue, Maomao questions the physician about whether the poison contained thornapple, which is known for its anesthetic properties. The physician is unsure but doesn't rule it out. Maomao then uses a tool to pry open Suayuri's coffin, revealing that the body inside is not Suayuri's. The physician is stunned, insisting that he saw Suayuri's body. Maomao suspects that the physician was tricked and didn't investigate the poison thoroughly. Jin asks why Suayuri's body would be swapped, and Maomao explains that Suayuri may have used a rare medication that can induce a death-like state. She points Gao Shun to an empty coffin nearby, and he finds nail marks inside, indicating that Suayuri had been lying there alive. Maomao then explains how Suayuri could have pulled off the deception with help from an accomplice. Maomao hopes to meet Suayuri again now that she understands the kind of person she is. She also wants to learn more about the medicine that could fake death. Meanwhile, Haku meets with Jin, and Gao Shun arrives with an update on Maomao's health. Jin thinks about Lacan's ties to Maomao and reflects briefly on his own life. Jin and Gao Shun also talk about Gao Shun's family, specifically his hope of finding a wife for Basin, his youngest son. Gao Shun teases Jin about finding a lover for himself. The two then visit Luo Lan. Jin notes that while the emperor is due to meet Luo Lan soon, he might not be interested in her. He describes Luo Lan as being so fashionable and distinct that she's often unrecognizable, but because of her ties to a chief vassal close to the Empress Dowager, the emperor can't completely ignore her. Jin also confirms that the emperor has no interest in Li Shu either. Later, Jin and Gao Shun visit Lady Jiao and learn about her bleeding condition. Jin leaves afterward and informs Maomao to head to the rear palace. Maomao is excited about the opportunity and suspects that Jiao might be pregnant. Once at the rear palace, Maomao takes on food tasting duties for Jiao but finds that her return has been relatively uneventful. After observing her more closely, Maomao realizes that Jiao may not be pregnant after all. Maomao leaves the palace, still pondering. Meanwhile, Haku visits the Verdigris house, where he overhears two girls talking. He learns that someone has bought out one of the Verdigris house's 3 princesses, leading to new questions. Maomao decides to visit Gen, also known as the Quack Doctor. She convinces him to let her help tidy up his messy pharmacy. After a while of cleaning, the two take a break and have a meal together. Maomao finds it odd that Gen serves food on paper, but she's impressed by how strong the paper is. Gen explains that his family used to make good money selling this paper. Unfortunately, their fortune took a turn for the worse when the previous emperor's mother banned tree cutting, which led to their business failing. The next day, Maomao returns to help Gen clean some more. This time, Gen hands her some documents and tells her that his family will no longer be the palace's official suppliers. Maomao understands how this is disappointing news for him. As she examines the documents, she notices the paper's quality isn't as good as before. It lacks the strength she's seen in the past. She asks Gen if their paper-making process has changed at all. Gen insists it's the same, but their family has a secret ingredient crushing and glue-making process that he can't disclose. Maomao, in her usual resourceful way, makes some arrowroot gruel for Gen to try, giving him some advice along the way. Gen is grateful and mentions that he'll be reaching out to his sister soon. Maomao leaves, but someone approaches her to let her know that Haku wants to see her. Haku meets Maomao and asks her how much it would cost to buy out a courtesan. Maomao instantly realizes he's talking about Perrin. She explains that it's usually something only a wealthy merchant or a high-ranking official could do. She reflects on her relationship with Perrin, who always treated Maomao like her own daughter. She then tells Haku that he'll need at least 10,000 silver in cash to buy out Perrin. Haku is shocked by the amount and asks if there's a chance Perrin would refuse his offer. Maomao then has an unexpected request. She asks Haku to strip to his undergarments so she can assess whether his physique would be appealing to Perrin. Just as Haku is about to take off his last layer of clothing, Jin walks in, utterly baffled by the scene. He demands to know what's going on. Maomao nonchalantly tells Jin that she was just getting a good look at Haku, which only serves to annoy Jin further. Sulking, Jin then asks for her honest opinion on Haku's appearance. Maomao gives her assessment, which surprises Jin as he realizes how perceptive she is. She can figure out someone's personality just by looking at them. Meanwhile, Haku is back in his room doing sit-ups, feeling frustrated about how much time he's wasting when he could be figuring out how to buy Perrin's freedom. Just then, Jin summons him for a meeting. To Haku's surprise, Jin offers him 20,000 silver to use to buy out Perrin. They talk about Haku's past, his accomplishments, and how he's gotten to where he is now. Though Haku appreciates Jin's generous offer and the praise, he refuses. He wants to earn the money himself rather than use someone else's to free Perrin. After leaving the meeting, Jin tells Gao Shun that there's nothing to worry about. Meanwhile, Haku contemplates how he can win Perrin's heart. He decides to write her a letter and show off during the next training regime. we get a brief montage of Haku training hard and thinking about Perrin, before cutting to Maomao sitting in her room, reflecting on an old case involving a courtesan buyer. Then, we shift scenes to a man approaching Lakan to inform him about an upcoming meeting. Out of the blue, Lakan starts talking about blue roses, leaving us with questions about what he means. Maomao confirms to the audience that Lady Jiao is pregnant. Soon after, Jiao's daughter approaches Maomao, and Maomao draws her a picture of a woolly milk-cap mushroom, a poisonous one. One of Jiao's workers quickly scolds Maomao and tells her to draw a nice, harmless flower instead. Meanwhile, Lakan visits Jin and Gaoshun in Jin's office. He starts talking about his fascination with blue roses. Jin, who thinks such a flower doesn't exist, tells Lakan he'd love to see blue roses in the palace. Lakan leaves looking pleased, and once he's gone, Jin asks Gaoshun to gather information from the palace florists about blue roses. Later, Gaoshun reports that blue roses aren't in season. This makes Jin approach Maomao, asking if she could somehow produce blue roses by next month's garden party. Maomao, thinking it's impossible, voices her concerns, but then notices something unusual in Jin's demeanor. She asks if Lakan is behind this, and Jin confirms it. Maomao decides to take on the task, secretly hoping she can somehow use this to mess with Lakan. Maomao submits a few requests to Jin and heads to Lady Lihua's place, asking if she can use her steam room. Lihua agrees, and after Maomao gives her a gift, she is left to her own devices. Jin and Gaoshun soon join Maomao in the steam room, where she reveals her plan to grow blue roses using the controlled environment. Gaoshun hands her a rose, but Maomao's leg injury causes her to wince in pain, which alarms both Jin and Gaoshun. Just then, Lan arrives, offering to help. We then see a montage of many people carrying potted roses into the steam room. Maomao explains that they've brought in over 100 roses and that they are separating and nurturing them in specific conditions to create the desired effect. While monitoring the roses, Lan and Maomao take a break, and Gaoshun brings them food. Afterward, Maomao and Lan, along with several palace workers, return to the steam room to check on the roses. Maomao instructs them to focus on the seedlings with the most sprouts. They also find a bug on one of the roses, which Lan quickly throws out. The story continues with scenes of Maomao putting in immense effort to help the blue roses grow. One day, while she and Lan are outside monitoring, Lan notices Maomao's fatigue and suggests she get some sleep. Maomao refuses, saying she must stay and keep watch over the roses. They end up sitting on a bench together, and Lan admires her new manicure, which Maomao tells her is common in the pleasure district. Other female workers notice Maomao's manicure and compliment her, though Hong Yang seems uninterested, much to Maomao's amusement. Maomao later informs Jiao that she has finished her poison testing activities and will be returning to the Crystal Pavilion to continue her work on the blue roses. Hong Yang then tells Maomao that Jiao won't be attending the upcoming garden party, it will be for Lady Luo Lan instead. Maomao figures that Jiao wants to keep her pregnancy a secret. Later on, Lan informs Maomao that one of the blue roses has produced a bud. Maomao falls asleep happily, hopeful that she will complete her task in time for the garden party. At the party, Maomao meets Jin and Gaoshun. Luo Lan arrives with her entourage to greet the emperor, and Jin presents him with several roses, including the blue ones. Other officials scoff, clearly envious of the attention Jin is receiving from the emperor. Though Jin is concerned about Luo Lan's father, Shishu, he feels that Lakan is the real person to watch out for. Elsewhere, Xinghua comforts Maomao, telling her not to return to the Crystal Pavilion anymore. Jin approaches them, and Maomao admits she couldn't get the blue roses to bloom naturally in time. She reveals that the blue roses were actually dyed from the inside, a trick she and Lan pulled off. She had informed the emperor about the trick before the garden party. After talking about her manicure with Jin, Maomao asks Gaoshun if he brought the item she requested. Gaoshun hands it to her, and Maomao knows her plan is in motion. She hopes to catch Lakan by surprise. Later, we see Haku talking to Lakan, who reveals that he sees people as game pieces. Lakan notices several women with manicures as he strolls through the palace. Suddenly, Maomao confronts him, with Jin and Gaoshun standing by her side. The chapter ends with Maomao giving Lakan a cold, blank stare. Maomao asks Lakan if he'd like to play a few games with her. She sets the rules: whoever wins 3 games first will be the victor. They also decide on their rewards. If Lakan wins, he wants Maomao to leave the palace and live with him. Maomao agrees, but only after her current contract ends. If Maomao wins, Lakan must buy out one of the elderly courtesans from the Verdigris house. Maomao then ups the stakes by pouring a deadly poison into several cups of water. After each match, the winner chooses a cup, and the loser must drink from it. The second rule: whoever abandons the game loses. They start playing, and Lakan wins the first round. He wins again, and Jin starts to worry about Maomao. In the third round, Lakan lets Maomao win, and Maomao asks if he's really okay with it. Lakan says yes because he doesn't want her to drink the poisoned water. Maomao lets Lakan pick a cup and he drinks. Moments later, Lakan collapses. Jin confronts Maomao, but she calmly explains that the poison is actually just medicine. Gao Shun checks on Lakan and finds that he's only drunk. Jin remembers that Lakan loves fruit juice. Maomao tells them to drag Lakan to a brothel so he can pick a flower. Then we get a flashback of Lakan's younger days. Lakan recalls that he's always struggled to tell people apart. His relationship with his father was rough and he devoted his life to mastering games like Go and chess. His uncle, who was the only one who understood him, advised him to view people as chess pieces. Thanks to his family connections, Lakan grew up leading a squadron and manipulating people like game pieces, something he found thrilling. One day, his colleagues brought him to the verdigris house to meet a famous courtesan named Feng Xian. This encounter changed everything. It was the first time Lakan saw someone in color. Feng Xian beat him at chess, and for the first time, Lakan felt truly seen. They continued to play together, and during one of their games, Feng Xian shared stories from her past. Feng Xian was a popular courtesan, often refusing buyout offers, which raised her price. One day, she asked Lakan when he'd be back, and he promised to return in 3 months. However, someone else made an offer to buy her out. Lakan wanted to save her but lacked the money. He and Feng Xian made a wager. If she won, she could ask anything of him, and if he won, he could have anything from her. This wager led to them getting closer. Unfortunately, Lakan's uncle was expelled, and Lakan's father sent him to study abroad for 3 years. He left, leaving Feng Xian behind. When he returned, Lakan found a pile of unopened letters and a small bag on his desk. Inside were 2 of Feng Xian's fingers. Horrified, he rushed to Verdigris' house, but he was too late. Old Granny berated him for abandoning Feng Xian. She was gone, and Lakan was devastated, realizing that he had lost her forever. Back in the present, Lakan wakes up to find Maomao beside him. She tells him that a servant brought him there. Lakan reminisces about his past games with Feng Xian while Maomao listens. She hands him a drink, a concoction made by Maomao. Lakan initially finds it disgusting but quickly changes his mind when he learns Maomao made it. Maomao then presents him with a box. Inside is a withered blue rose, still retaining its shape. Even though it's wilted, its beauty remains. The story then shifts to Maomao riding in a carriage, holding a blue rosebud that she pulls from her cloak, looking at it thoughtfully. Lakan looks at the withered rose that Maomao left for him, thinking about how he wishes he could be with her. He understands why Maomao doesn't like him, but he's still determined to keep his promise to her. He recalls, with a bit of irritation, how one of the men who accompanied Maomao had touched her shoulder 3 times during their match. Old Granny arrives to greet Lakan and asks him to follow her. She wants him to choose a courtesan from the available ones. Lakan asks if she's really willing to let him pick one of the 3 princesses. Old Granny agrees, as long as he pays well. Lakan looks at them and says they all look like go pieces to him, but he eventually picks Maomao. Maomao laughs, proud of her work, and tells Lakan she's fine with his choice if that's what he wants. She then opens a door and tells Lakan that if he has to make a choice, he should make it wisely. Suddenly, Lakan hears Feng Xian's voice and rushes to find her. When he arrives, a tear falls from his eye. Old Granny and Maomao catch up, and Old Granny tells Lakan to leave since this is a place for the sick. Lakan ignores her, approaching Feng Xian and saying that he wants to buy her. He puts several game pieces in her hand and challenges her to a round of Go. He marvels at her and repeats that he wants to buy her. Elsewhere, Maomao talks with Basin, mentioning that Basin helped her bring Lakan to the Verdigris house. They notice Luo Lan and her father nearby, and Maomao wishes Basin wouldn't speak poorly of high-ranking officials in public. She worries that people might assume she's the one bad-mouthing them. Later, Maomao visits Jin's quarters. Suiron gives her food and leaves her alone with Jin and Gao Shun. Jin asks Maomao about her feelings towards Lakan. Maomao explains that she doesn't hate him. In fact, she exists today thanks to Lakan, and she believes Feng Xian wanted to have her. She wonders if Lakan was tricked because Feng Xian was clever and found a way to control his visits through her letters. When Feng Xian lost control, she became desperate and hurt herself. Maomao brings up Lakan's inability to recognize human faces, something her adoptive father, Luo Men, told her. She wonders how Lakan can recognize her and Luo Men's faces, which might explain his strange attachment to her. Jin jokes that if Lakan ever called him father, he would break his monocle. Maomao then looks at a pair of blue roses and wonders if Lakan understood the message she left with the withered rose. She tells Jin that, though she dislikes Lakan, she doesn't hate him. She's also grateful to be Luo Men's daughter. Maomao mentions that Lakan helped her during the ceremony stopping incident, which surprises Jin. She describes Lakan as someone who acts on gut feelings, unlike her, and is too lazy to make decisions on his own. She thinks if Lakan had truly acted, she would have gotten the resurrection drug, and she knows Luo Men would praise Lakan without hesitation. She warns Jin not to make Lakan an enemy, as Lakan won't see Jin as an ally. Gao Shun adds that no father likes being disliked. A few days later, Maomao receives a package from Maid, which contains a letter and a beautiful shawl. Maomao remembers Maid asking her to dance for her when she was purchased. Later, Maomao heads to the outer wall, removes her work attire, revealing a stunning dress underneath, and begins to dance. After her dance, she turns and finds Jin there. He startles her and she nearly falls, but Jin catches her. Jin tells her he heard reports of a strange woman climbing the wall. A guard spotted Maomao and raised the alarm. Jin asks what she was doing, and Maomao explains that when a courtesan is bought in the pleasure district, the others dance for them. She says she was taught how to dance for such occasions. Jin then informs her that Lakan has bought a courtesan and is taking a 10-day vacation. Maomao remembers her elder sisters mentioning a banquet that would last several days. Jin asks if she knows who Lakan purchased, but Maomao doesn't answer. Jin suspects she knows, but Maomao says it doesn't matter. She remarks that the courtesan's beauty can't compare to Jin's. She adds that the courtesan Lakan purchased won't last long. Maomao also says that no one talked to her about her mother during her time in the brothel, and that old granny likes to keep things private. Maomao reflects that she was part of the reason the Verdigris house almost went out of business. She confirms that the nightmare she once had was real, but despite everything, she is happy to be Liu Men's daughter. She talks about fingertips and how they can grow back, which Jin finds strange. When Maomao's leg wound opens up, Jin becomes concerned. Maomao insists that she has a high pain tolerance and tries to stitch herself up, but Jin stops her. She worries about being seen in this position, but Jin reassures her, reminding her that he's carried her like this before. Maomao says she wants to ask Jin something important. They get closer, and she asks if he can give her the ox bezor. In response, Jin playfully headbutts her, leaving Maomao bewildered. They walk off together. The next day, Maomao is at the Jade Pavilion, admiring Jin's gift. Someone informs her that Jin has arrived and wants to speak with her. He tells her he has a mission for her, and Maomao finds it intriguing. The story ends with a glimpse of the sky and the narrator hinting at Maomao's ongoing adventures and what may come next. The next day, in Mao City, everyone is filled with excitement. Joka and Maid are in town, visiting Madam. In the midst of all this energy, an elderly woman is seen collecting books and signing them. She's overjoyed about expanding her business, especially since she has struck a deal with Mao to distribute these books. Meanwhile, Jinshi, accompanied by his assistant Gaeshun, is traveling and discussing the lack of knowledge among the women working in the area. Jinshi makes the rounds, meeting people and noting that the king of the city has many concubines, but one stands out as the most favored. Intrigued, Jinshi decides to search for Mao, and he's informed that she's working at the clinic. At the clinic, Mao is preparing a concoction.
何をやっている?
When Jinshi arrives, he asks about her work. She explains that she's creating a special scent using chemicals that she receives through daily flower deliveries. The scent is designed to affect those with weak concentration, making them behave strangely. She prefers to create it here in the clinic to avoid any unintended consequences elsewhere. Jinshi is impressed by Mao's dedication and thoughtfulness. Mao also mentions that she is making alcohol, but it's not for drinking. It's meant for cleaning purposes. She shows Jinshi how effective it is by cleaning a table. Jinshi acknowledges that using alcohol for cleaning is common in the West. Just as they're talking, two men arrive with a courier package for Mao. This makes her anxious. Jinshi notices her reaction and wonders about the package's contents. Mao claims that it's from her family, containing undergarments. Jinshi accepts her explanation without asking more. However, Gaeshun is curious about why two armed men were needed to deliver undergarments. Mao explains that the women in the area are not knowledgeable about many things, so she brought them books to educate them. She believes that if the king learns that many of these women are inexperienced, it might affect their roles in the palace. As Jinshi flips through the books, he finds them to be well made with detailed illustrations, which will help even those who cannot read. Gaeshun also examines the books and appreciates their quality. Mao is relieved, feeling that her business might actually succeed. Jinshi suggests that they visit the printing house where the books were made to learn about their techniques. Gaeshun points out that some pictures are blurred for no reason, and Mao agrees to show him clearer versions. Later, Mao's friend, who loves food, sings a song about a beautiful flower. She tells Mao that the books are fantastic, and one of the girls, who cannot read, reads the books aloud for others. Mao had only brought 100 copies due to the constraints of printing by hand, as there is no printing machine in the city. Noticing the growing demand for the books, Mao decides to get involved in politics to expand her business and earn commissions. She encourages the girl who is reading aloud to copy the books for others. Praising the girl for her abilities, Mao watches as more women begin copying the books to meet the increasing demand. By the next morning, the copied books are distributed among the women, and they are thrilled. Mao recalls that Jinshi had mentioned how many women in the city are illiterate and unaware of many things. She sits with her friend, who expresses a desire to learn how to read and write so that she can do something meaningful in the future. Mao agrees to teach her, starting with writing her name on the ground. Although her friend struggles at first, she is eager to learn more, especially words that are used in daily life. Mao promises to teach her practical vocabulary for everyday use. That night, a girl ventures out into the dark, facing harsh weather. Suddenly, something attacks her. Meanwhile, Mao is playing with a young princess named Linge. Mao suggests taking Linge outside to play, and her mother agrees, trusting Mao to care for the girl. Mao believes that her knowledge will benefit Linge, especially when it comes to identifying poisons and medicines. Mao, Linge, and their two guards step outside, and the people they pass seem pleased to see them. Mao is hopeful that Linge will learn to recognize good and bad people over time. As they stroll through an alley, they encounter a small cat. Linge is eager to play with it, so Mao tries to catch it. The cat runs into the nearby forest, and they follow it. Mao tries again but fails to catch it. Suddenly, another girl appears, quickly catching the cat and handing it to Mao. She advises Mao to feed the cat properly. Linge asks if she can have the cat, but Mao tells her that the cat is too dirty at the moment. Linge starts crying, so Mao decides to take the cat to the doctor. The doctor is pleased to see the cat and brings a soft cloth for it to sit on. Mao asks for milk, and the doctor leaves to fetch it. Mao starts cleaning the cat, and when the doctor returns with the milk, she feeds the cat. The prince, who observes the situation, commends Mao for catching the cat. Since Linge wanted to play with it, the prince asks Mao to take care of the cat until it is healthy and then bring it to him. He even names the cat Maomao, noticing that it sounds like Mao's name. Mao continues to care for the cat, feeding it and cleaning it. As the cat begins to recover, it starts cleaning the doctor's room, catching mice. Mao wonders why the cat was named Maomao and reflects on the prince's fondness for the cat. Meanwhile, two maids are discussing the arrival of someone named Caravan. Curious, Mao asks about Caravan, and the two girls arriving in a buggy seem to be the ones she's referring to. The Grand Caravan Festival was one of the most anticipated events of the year, where merchants from far and wide gathered to display their wares. Jin, who was managing the event's preparations, approached Gyakuyo to check if everything was ready. Gyakuyo, looking confident, assured him that everything was nearly done and that the high-ranking officials were expected soon. Jin complimented her on the excellent work and expressed his belief that the festival would be a success. Meanwhile, Gyakuyo's servant was busy organizing the maids, assigning them their tasks. Everyone, including Mao, was hard at work, moving in perfect coordination. During their tasks, Mao's friend noticed an old dress design and suggested it be replaced. Mao, curious, asked what they did with the old clothes. Her friend explained that they were either reworked or donated to poorer people who still made use of them. Before they could discuss it further, another maid arrived, reminding them to stop chatting and focus on work. The nobles began arriving on horseback, and Mao's friend was excited to talk about the noble women present, pointing out the number of servants each one had. Their senior maid soon stepped in, scolding the girls for talking too much. They were quick to refocus on their work, although gossip resumed shortly after. The entire city was being transformed for the caravan festival, with colorful stalls being set up in preparation. The girls briefly paused from their work when their senior maid passed by. Her presence sending them into a flurry of activity, eager to avoid another scolding. In Lady Lihua's room, her maid Shin handed her a list of items that she needed to buy from the market. As Shin left, she received a message that caused her expression to change, becoming serious. Mao and her friend watched from afar, admiring the neatness of the market, particularly the water systems, which were well maintained. Her friend asked for a day off to shop, and Mao, with a smile, agreed. Lady Gyakuyo was busy unboxing a large shipment of dresses she had ordered, and she wondered if she might have overdone it. Her maid reassured her that many others had placed even larger orders. Now reflected that Lady Lihua, Lishu, and even Len had all ordered massive amounts of clothes and perfumes. Mao was particularly interested in the dress designs, noticing that some dresses had belts tied around the chest rather than the waist. She found this impractical since a waist belt was more flattering and comfortable. Gyakuyo explained that she wanted to offer a variety of designs and asked her maid to bring over any new patterns. On the last day of the festival, Mao and her friend went shopping. The market was filled with vibrant colors, and her friend was delighted by all the exciting items on display. Gyakuyo had given them money to spend, and Mao, feeling generous, bought her friend a beautiful ribbon, making her even happier. They explored the market, discovering exotic spices and rare tea leaves. Mao was thrilled when she found jasmine tea, her favorite, and was glad she had come on the last day when everything was discounted. While purchasing the tea, they were approached by another girl who Mao recognized. It was the same girl who had helped her catch a cat previously. This girl, Sewe, was from the northern district and had a deep knowledge of herbs and rare tea. Mao's friend proudly showed off the ribbon Mao had given her, and the three began chatting, apologizing to the vendor for crowding the stall. Afterward, they went to visit the doctor, who was pleased to see them. Mao brewed the jasmine tea, and the sweet aroma filled the room. Her friends were impressed and they enjoyed a cake together. Mao, however, began to feel uneasy. She remembered that Shisui had only recently arrived in the city, coinciding with Lady Lan's return. The doctor, interrupting her thoughts, mentioned a large shipment arriving from overseas. Mao couldn't help but wonder if something was amiss. Shisui explained that her work in the north involved sketching bugs and herbs, especially since the region was full of rare plants and spiders. Unlike the south, which was clean and well maintained, the north was wilder, which piqued Mao's interest, as she loved medicinal ingredients. They bonded over their shared passion for insects and herbal remedies. Later, Mao and her friend were washing the festival clothes, which had a strong, overpowering scent. As Mao sniffed them, she became suspicious. The fragrance was too potent, and she believed it could be dangerous for pregnant women. The scent could cause complications or harm to unborn babies. Determined to find out more, Mao began sniffing all the clothes, searching for those with the dangerous fragrance. Her actions caught everyone's attention, and she even visited several rooms to continue her investigation. Eventually, Lady Lan discovered Mao's actions and reported her to Gyakuyo. Jin, who was involved in the event's preparations, was informed and was not pleased. Mao, realizing that her actions had led to a complaint, quickly apologized, explaining that she didn't know it would cause such a reaction. Jin, confused, asked Mao to explain herself. She handed him a list of items and requested he read it aloud. As Jin read the names, Gyakuyo began to realize that they were all different types of perfumes. Mao confirmed that the scents in the clothes were perfumes, and many of them were unsafe for pregnant women. While the perfumes weren't outright dangerous, excessive use could pose risks, especially during pregnancy. Mao suspected that someone was selling these harmful perfumes at the festival and wanted to identify the seller. Jin agreed to investigate the matter, recalling a previous incident where toxic powder had caused the deaths of several children. He didn't want history to repeat itself. He ordered Gyakuyo to look into it immediately, and Gyakuyo, along with her maid, began their investigation. As Mao sat alone, sipping her jasmine tea, she pondered the situation. She remembered past attacks, including one on Jin, which she had helped prevent. She wondered who was behind this new scheme and how to uncover their plan. Lost in thought, she was interrupted by Jin, who teased her about the tea. He joked about the poison in her cup, and Mao, with a smirk, warned him that small doses of poison could actually be medicinal. Jin, unfazed by her joke, asked for some tea. Mao warned him that diluting it would ruin the taste, but Jin insisted. She jokingly told him that the tea might turn him into a man. But he didn't respond, leaving her wondering if he even understood humor. Just as they were about to continue their conversation, Gyakuyo arrived with disturbing news. Shin had died, apparently from poison. Jin was shocked. The situation had taken a dark turn, and the Grand Caravan Festival, which was supposed to be a celebration, had now become the backdrop for a deadly mystery. Jin and Geishan were traveling to the Jade Pavilion when Gyakuyo informed Hongying that Lady Jin had died from food poisoning. Later, Mao paid a visit to Gen, who shared that a woman named Tao had gone missing. During a meeting with Jin and Geishan, Mao and Jin discussed the Emperor's novels and how the palace workers were eager to read them. Jin shared his idea of creating a writing school, and Mao immediately liked the idea. She believed it would give the workers an opportunity to find new jobs once their apprenticeships were over. After offering some suggestions, Jin asked Mao if she knew anything about mushrooms. Jin was concerned that some mushrooms could cause food poisoning, and he wanted her to dispose of anything that might accidentally be eaten. He also asked Mao to keep an eye out for any poisonous mushrooms. As Mao traveled north, she noticed a strange odor in the air. Returning to the Jade Pavilion, she told the audience she had given Gen a basket filled with poisonous mushrooms. Mao also observed black cords tied around Gyakuyo and Hongying's wrists. She knew these were worn when someone of noble status passed away. Gyakuyo then invited Mao to join her for an evening meal. Later, both Hongying and Mao attended Jin's funeral, where she learned more about the possible link between Jin's death and Gyakuyo's poisoning. Mao started connecting Jin's death to the poisonous mushrooms Jin had wanted her to dispose of, realizing that palace rumors suggested someone from the Jade Pavilion had killed Jin. She couldn't help but wonder who was behind the tragedy. After paying her respects to Jin at the funeral, Mao noticed Lady Su rushing toward the coffin, disrupting the flowers and removing the cloth from Jin's body. Su laughed at Jin, and both girls displayed rashes. Mao walked through a forest, reflecting on Su's actions at the funeral. She thought about how Su's rash might have caused her to develop an unfavorable life, and she speculated that Su had caused the scene at Jin's funeral because of her rash, which she believed Jin had caused. Mao then met with Jin and Geishan and showed them a strange mushroom. She explained why it was so dangerous and cautioned them to keep their distance. Jin shared his thoughts on the situation, mentioning the rumors that Su had gotten her rash from Jin. Mao listened intently and learned that Jin had also developed a rash the year before. Jin told Mao more about Jin's condition, and Mao realized that Jin had died after eating a poisonous mushroom. However, she noticed something odd. The symptoms from the mushroom shouldn't have spread to someone's face. She speculated that someone had rubbed the poisonous mushroom on Jin's face. Mao asked Jin for a team of capable, discreet eunuchs to help her investigate the case. Jin agreed and sent Mao, Geishan, and a group of eunuchs into a forest. There, Mao directed them to dig near a spot where mushrooms were growing. To their surprise, they uncovered the real Lady Jin's body. Geishan and Mao returned to Jin to report their findings. Mao explained that the real Jin had died a year ago, and her cause of death remained a mystery. She also suggested that someone had taken the real Jin's place after her death. Geishan had many questions about the Jin who had appeared at the funeral, and Mao showed Jin and Geishan a document with an image of Tao. They realized that Tao looked identical to Jin. Mao believed that Tao had deceived Jin and everyone else by hiding her true identity behind bandages. She predicted that Tao had teamed up with Jin's attendants to fool everyone into thinking she was Jin. However, Mao speculated that jealousy had led to a deadly confrontation between Jin and Tao. Mao explained that Jin's attendants had covered up the death because they felt sorry for Tao. However, she believed that once marriage discussions began, the attendants had turned on Tao. Then, Mao presented Jin with a basket of mushrooms, explaining that these grew near animal carcasses and feces. Jin ordered Geishan to take the mushrooms away, and he left with them. Mao, however, noticed a mushroom on the ground, which left her pondering the significance of the blue mushrooms. Mao stepped into Jayakayou's room, where a stunning mirror hung on the wall. Everyone in the room was admiring it, marveling at its beauty. Jayakayou, too, seemed enchanted, commenting on how perfectly the mirror reflected everything. Intrigued by its elegance, Mao moved closer to examine it. She couldn't help but think that such a mirror must have been incredibly difficult to make, and surely it was rare and expensive. As she stood there, one of the maids warned her to be careful, remembering how she had once broken a similar glass. Another maid, teasingly, asked why she always brought up the past, while a third commented on how unusually interested Mao seemed in the mirror. Mao quickly denied it but admitted she was curious about the craftsmanship of the mirror. Jayakayou explained that a foreign merchant had gifted it to her. This caught Mao's attention. She remembered hearing her doctor mention something large arriving from abroad, and she realized that this mirror must be the one. The conversation shifted when another maid revealed that all 4 concubines had received identical mirrors. Mao, surprised, marveled at how carefully this fragile item must have been shipped from a foreign country, as it would be difficult to transport something so delicate. Later, Jayakayou turned to Mao and asked if they could speak privately. A maid, sensing something secretive, tried to join them but was dismissed by Jayakayou. However, Mao noticed that the maid had no real interest in Jayakayou, especially after hearing he was married with a child. This piqued Mao's curiosity, and she wondered why the maid was even involved in their conversation. Jayakayou began to explain a strange situation. He spoke of a friend's sister who had been living in isolation for a long time but had somehow gotten pregnant. The maid speculated that perhaps she had been involved with one of the guards, but Jayakayou dismissed this, saying the guards only watched from a distance. Mao was confused. This situation seemed far too complicated, and finding out the truth was becoming more difficult by the minute. The maid, still puzzled, asked how it was even possible for a woman to get pregnant without any male contact. Mao, recalling a past case, shared the story of a patient who had believed she was pregnant, even though she wasn't. The patient's body had even shown signs of pregnancy. This made Jayakayou wonder if perhaps his friend's sister had secretly left the building. He then showed Mao a map of her room, describing the layout. There were 2 windows where the guards could watch, and the girls often sat near these windows, wearing identical clothes as part of their family tradition. Mao then began to consider the possibility that the mirror could be the key to solving the mystery. She wondered if it could reflect one girl's image twice, making it appear as though there were 2. Testing her theory, she used a photo of a smiling face, flipping it to show how it turned angry. This mirrored the effect she thought could happen with the girl's reflections. She also experimented with a rabbit, showing how the mirror could deceive the eye. Mao concluded that the mirror in Jayakayou's room must have been of the highest quality, just like the one Jayakayou had. Only the wealthy could afford such mirrors, and given the girl's love for weaving clothes, Mao suspected that she must have come from a wealthy family. The guards, she reasoned, had seen one girl reflected twice, not 2 separate people. Jayakayou was stunned by her conclusion and left with a newfound understanding. Mao, however, was just happy to have received herbs for making medicine, her true passion. Meanwhile, Jin was deep in thought, troubled by a memory. He had once seen a beautiful girl dancing under the moonlight, a sight so captivating that it had stayed with him ever since. Her tears, like falling stars, had made her unforgettable. A foreign trader wanted to meet her, hoping to secure a major trade deal. Jin, suspecting that the girl might be found in the pleasure district where many women danced, asked Mao to help identify her. Mao casually replied that Jin had already met her in the pleasure district. Jin was taken aback, asking how she knew. Mao hinted that the girl was actually Granny. She suggested that if Jin paid Granny, she would come immediately. Shocked, Jin realized that the foreign trader was expecting a young beauty, and Granny certainly wasn't young anymore. Curious about the trader, Mao asked Jin about him. He explained that the trader had deals in both the north and west, and inter-country marriages had become common. They might be able to deceive the trader if Granny was convincing enough. However, if the trick failed, it could lead to serious consequences. Mao went to meet Granny, joking that she never imagined Granny was so popular in her youth. Granny smiled wistfully, admitting that she had been famous, once the best dancer in the pleasure district. People came from far and wide to watch her perform, but her success had also brought jealousy from other dancers. Some even tried to sabotage her, sticking bugs to her clothes. But Granny had used this as motivation to improve and shine even brighter. Granny showed Mao an old photograph of herself, and Mao was stunned. Granny had been absolutely stunning in her youth. Mao wondered how someone so beautiful could have aged so poorly. She took the photo to Jin, who was equally surprised. Finding a girl like that today seemed impossible. Mao suggested they search for a girl who was tall, around 175 centimeters, with a great body and elegant movements. Someone who could imitate Granny's dance style. Jayakayu, overhearing this, suggested that maybe Granny had a cousin they could train. Mao dismissed this idea, pointing out that any cousin would be too old now. Then, she glanced at Jin with a curious look, which made him uncomfortable.
何が言いたい?
Was Mao suggesting that he dress up and act as the girl? Elsewhere, a mysterious girl stood gazing at the moon. Mao made her way north of the rear palace, where she was greeted by Shishui, who showed her a collection of moths. Shishui suggested that Mao come back at night to watch the moths fly. Intrigued, Mao asked Shishui many questions about the moths. As the conversation continued, Mao revealed that she needed Shishui's help with something important. We then get a glimpse of Mao and her allies working together, preparing for something big. Time passed quickly, and soon Mao informed the audience that they were holding a grand banquet to welcome the envoys. This event was held in the very same place where one of the envoys had seen Madame perform 50 years ago. Mao stood hidden behind a bush, observing the envoys and the festivities. She couldn't help but comment on the events unfolding and share her thoughts on the envoys' appearances and reactions to the gathering. One of the envoys, Isla, stood up from her seat and made her way to the emperor. She told him how unfortunate it was that she couldn't meet his younger brother. Her sister, Ailan, urged Isla to return to her seat, which she did. Mao, still observing from a distance, decided to leave for a nearby building. Inside, she met with Gaoshan and Jin. It was revealed that Jin would take on the role of the moon spirit. Mao escorted Jin to a special location, and soon, the moon spirit's dance began. From a distance, Isla and Ailan watched them closely. They seemed curious about the scene unfolding before them. Isla and Ailan then approached Mao, confronting her directly. With a calm and confident gesture, Mao pointed at the moon and said, "Diana," referencing the Western moon goddess. This statement seemed to surprise Isla and Ailan, who were both intrigued by her words. Later, Mao visited Gaoshan again, explaining how she had used Shishui's moths to pull off the plan. Everything had gone smoothly, and the envoys had likely gotten what they wanted. The next day, Jin returned, soaking wet. Mao told him that she had probably fulfilled the envoy's request. While pondering the events, Mao met with Xiaolin, who greeted her excitedly. Xiaolin mentioned she was attending a new school, and Mao, lost in thought, rested under a tree. She couldn't stop thinking about the mysterious perfume that had been brought into the imperial palace. In a flashback, she recalled her conversation with Jin, where they discussed the potential culprit behind the perfume. They agreed that the envoys must have had someone sneak it in, with the intention of infiltrating the consort's ranks. However, Mao concluded that with the envoys' pride shattered, they no longer believed it was worth pursuing. As Mao reflected on these matters, she met with Yinghua and Ailan. Ailan was feeling ill, so Yinghua suggested they take her to the clinic. At the clinic, the worker examined Ailan and gave her permission to stay the night. Mao, eager to get involved, tried to approach the worker but was promptly kicked out. Later, Mao bumped into Jin and Gaoshan, and the trio discussed her thoughts about the clinic and the expectations medical officers must meet. Jin warned Mao to keep her medicine preparations a secret, and with that, he and Gaoshan left. Meanwhile, Ailan found a piece of paper with something inside it. Before she could sniff it, the same woman who had kicked Mao out approached her and questioned her. She asked if Mao had been preparing medicine, a question that seemed to put Ailan on edge. Mao, still in her room, was busy preparing the medicine in secrecy, unaware of what was unfolding at the clinic. Mao, disguised to avoid recognition, had a quiet chat with Jayakuyo and Ailan. During their conversation, Jayakuyo informed her that a palace worker from the clinic was seeking to speak with her. Mao and her assistant, Yinghua, met with the worker, who introduced herself as Shenlu. Shenlu had a concerning request. She needed Mao to prepare medicine for Lihua's maid, who had developed a strange cough. The maid had been absent from the palace for half a month, as Shenlu had advised her to take a break. With this information in hand, Mao decided she needed to speak with Jin before delving deeper into the matter. As they made their way out of the clinic, the scene cut to the maid, coughing up blood in a dimly lit corner. Meanwhile, at the Crystal Pavilion, Mao met with Shenlu again. She was disguised to avoid being recognized, but Shenlu still seemed to recognize her as she escorted Mao and Gen to Lihua's room. The meeting revealed something troubling. Shenlu was not just any palace worker. She was of noble birth, just like Lihua, and her jealousy seemed to simmer beneath the surface as she guided them through the palace. While Shenlu led them, Mao couldn't help but notice a storage room nearby. Gen, ever curious, asked about the storage room and the garden. That's when Shenlu's suspicion grew. She realized that Mao was the person she'd encountered before during the perfume sniffing incident. In a flash, Mao grabbed Shenlu's hand as Gen opened the storage room. To their shock, inside, they found the sick maid, lying weak and pale. Mao immediately ordered Gen to boil water as she began treating the maid. Shenlu entered the room and explained that she had kept the maid hidden there to stop her illness from spreading. Mao, piecing everything together, realized that the maid's disease and the strange fragrance she had smelled earlier were connected. The maid had likely been placed in the storage room to mask the scent of a dangerous perfume. Mao discovered a box of perfume hidden away and immediately recognized the contents. These were the same banned goods from a caravan. Suspicious, Mao confronted Shenlu about her intentions, accusing her of trying to create an abortion pill. Shenlu, caught off guard, stayed silent. With her suspicions confirmed, Mao left, deep in thought. Later, Gaeshun arrived with new clothes for Mao, and the two made their way to a meeting with Jin, Lihua, and Shenlu. The interrogation was intense. Shenlu tried to defend herself, but her words only made things worse. Mao, confident in her findings, mentioned that she could smell the perfume oil on Shenlu's skin, linking her to the crime. Shenlu, in a fit of rage, slapped Mao when she tried to confirm the smell. But Lihua stepped in, stepping between the two women. As Lihua moved towards Shenlu, she pondered aloud how Shenlu had never truly respected her as the consort or the mother of the nation. Shenlu, furious, revealed her deep resentment toward Lihua, claiming she deserved to be the true mother of the nation. In a desperate attempt to assert her dominance, Shenlu tried to throw the perfume at Lihua, but Gaeshun stopped her in time. The tension reached its peak when Lihua slapped Shenlu, declaring that she could no longer remain in the imperial palace. Gaeshun, ever the protector, intervened before things could escalate further. After the confrontation, Jin, Gaeshun, and Mao made their way to the storage room once more. Jin handed Mao a handkerchief to wipe away the blood on her cheek from Shenlu's slap. Mao shared how she had uncovered the truth about the maid and the dangerous perfume. She then discussed the bushes near the storage room, pondering whether anyone might have been spreading information about the ingredients for abortion drugs. Jin listened carefully, but Mao was unsure who could be behind it. She advised him to proceed with caution, as the situation could become even more complicated. Just then, one of Lihua's maids arrived, and Mao informed her that the sick maid would be leaving the imperial palace for treatment. As the scene shifted, Lihua and the emperor were seen having a private conversation. Jin was a young boy, full of curiosity and innocence, playing with a ball. He wandered into a dark room, his laughter echoing, only to find a group of people surrounding him. His mother, panic-stricken, rushed in and pulled him away. In that moment, an old lady appeared from the shadows, and strangely, both Jin and his mother fell silent. The boy, confused and bewildered, couldn't understand what had just happened. Who are these people, and why did his mother react so strangely? He had always believed the man he called his father was truly his father. But what if he was wrong? The more Jin thought about it, the more he realized something didn't add up. The memories felt like dreams, blending together, leaving him uncertain. Could the elderly couple be his grandparents? Why did his mother seem so disturbed that night? Was it all a dream, or was it a memory? These questions lingered in his mind as he tried to make sense of it all. Time passed, and Jin found himself in a classroom, seated next to his friend Jayakuyo. The teacher was telling a fascinating story about a legendary queen mother from a faraway land. She had once ruled a powerful empire and resided in a grand temple. Despite her poor night vision, she had led her people with strength and wisdom, leaving behind a mysterious legacy that had survived for generations. As the teacher spoke, Jin couldn't help but feel drawn to the story, even though it wasn't about him. Mao, who had been standing at a distance, overheard the lesson as she watched the children. Jin, always making his presence known, appeared behind her and jokingly asked what she was doing. Mao, ever the focused one, shushed him as she didn't want him disturbing the class. She muttered to herself that Jin was like an alien, always appearing out of nowhere and interrupting things. The lesson continued, and Jayakuyo leaned over to Jin, mentioning that the number of students in the class had doubled. Mao, happy to see her friend thriving, smiled but still remained distracted by the story. Jayakuyo told Jin it was time to leave, and he asked Mao if she would join them. She declined, saying she wanted to stay a little longer. Afterward, Mao asked Jayakuyo what she had learned in class. The girl eagerly explained how she had been staying after school to ask the teacher extra questions, clearly excited about her education. As she walked away, Mao found herself drawn to the temple again, the one the teacher had mentioned. Inside the temple, the teacher noticed Mao's presence and, though a bit annoyed, allowed her to stay. Mao marveled at the architecture, which was breathtaking. The teacher explained that the temple had once been home to the Queen Mother. She had made a powerful declaration before her death: whoever reached the top of the temple's roof would be the next ruler, but only someone from her bloodline could do so. It was said that her child, whom she had carried in her womb, had died before birth, and after her passing, a decree was left behind, stating that only a true descendant could reach the temple's peak. Later that evening, Mao accompanied the king and Jin to the temple. Mao couldn't help but feel uneasy. She had seen this temple earlier in the day, and now it felt like she was walking into an enigma. The teacher warned the king, saying that he had failed many times before in his attempts, but the king remained determined to try again, this time with Mao and Jin by his side. As they approached a set of colorful gates, a sign cautioned them against choosing certain colors, specifically red. Without hesitation, the king chose the green gate and proceeded. They made their way through a series of chambers, each one leading to yet another door. Mao grew bored and wondered why she hadn't stayed home. Eventually, they reached the final chamber, and on the wall was a message: "Though you are of royal blood, you cannot be king." The teacher's voice was calm as he announced that the result was the same as before. Nothing had changed. Mao couldn't help but wonder about the teacher. Was he working for the royal family? What was his true role in all of this? As they exited the temple, Mao sat, reflecting on what had just happened. Why had the gates been designed in such a manner? Why were there restrictions on color? An old man's voice broke her thoughts. He mentioned that her adoptive father might have been able to solve the puzzle. This remark sparked something within Mao. If her father could figure it out, then maybe she could too. She recalled lessons from her past, particularly something about the Queen Mother's poor eyesight. Then it all clicked. Excitedly, Mao shared her realization with the king. She asked if any royal descendants had issues with their vision. The king, though uncertain, mentioned that he had heard rumors about it. Mao, now confident in her theory, insisted that they return to the temple. The teacher, though wary, warned that Mao wasn't a princess or a concubine and shouldn't attempt the test again. The king, trying to lighten the mood, joked that he could make her a concubine if she wanted. Jin, however, quickly stepped in, warning the king against it, suggesting that the other concubines would be furious. The group returned to the temple, and this time Mao chose the blue gate, despite the king's hesitation. He had already attempted the blue gate before, but Mao was undeterred. She pushed forward, confidently choosing each gate one by one. Eventually, they found themselves standing on the rooftop, much to the surprise of the king and Jin. The teacher congratulated Mao, explaining that she had chosen correctly. She had deciphered the secret. The Queen Mother, with her poor night vision, would only have been able to clearly see one color, blue. It was a test for anyone attempting to follow in her footsteps. Mao, recalling something her father had once told her about vision issues, pieced everything together. The Queen Mother, who had come from the west and moved to the north, had established a legacy that only someone of her bloodline could uphold. As the king and Jin stood there, still processing the revelation, Mao couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to Jin than met the eye. She couldn't help but wonder, was he just a loyal servant of the king? Or could he be something more? Mao found herself in the storeroom, an unexpected punishment handed down by her strict head maid. The maid had ordered her to clean and organize everything alone as a consequence of something that had happened in the past. The incident was minor. Mao had brought in a lizard's tail, and her friend had warned her that if the head maid found out, she could be sent to the storeroom permanently. Surprisingly, Mao wasn't upset. In fact, she felt a sense of relief. To her, the storeroom was a perfect place for her to work, experiment, and make her medicines. Once alone, Mao danced joyfully, her worries forgotten as she began her work with a sense of contentment. This wasn't a punishment at all, she thought. It was her sanctuary. Later, as Mao sat with her friend, the topic turned to her fascination with insects, and her friend assumed Mao had been collecting them. Mao corrected her, revealing that it was just a lizard's tail. Her friend mentioned a rumor about a girl who loved catching insects and dancing with them, hinting that it could be Mao herself. Intrigued, Mao started asking more questions about a girl named Susie who was believed to do just that. Her friend had no information, so Mao turned to the other maids. At first, they were hesitant to speak, knowing Mao held a higher status. Understanding their reluctance, Mao showed them a handkerchief given to her by Jin, a kind gesture that charmed the maids into sharing what they knew. They told her Susie was last seen in the northern woods. Curious, Mao decided to search for her. In the forest, Mao found herself surrounded by familiar flowers that sparked childhood memories. These flowers, once used for makeup, could now serve another purpose. They could be mixed into a potent chemical, one that could have affected Lei Hao. However, creating the medicine required rare ingredients that came from distant traveling caravans. Mao wondered if Susie had been taught to make such things, and who could have taught her. Just as she pondered this, Susie appeared, catching an insect and joyfully showing it to Mao. She explained that she loved catching them and taking them to the east. It was then that Mao realized Susie was just like her. As they continued talking, they saw the queen walking by. Mao quickly hid, admiring the queen's youth and beauty. Her friend, who had been with her, noticed the queen and asked why she was hiding. Mao explained that she didn't want the queen to see her, fearing judgment. Her friend reassured her, saying that the queen was heading to the clinic she had built, and that everyone was welcome to use it. The queen had abolished slavery upon taking the throne, and no one could be held captive anymore. This moved Mao deeply, and she was eager to learn more about the queen's leadership. Later, when Mao returned to the palace, she was told she needed to clean up the place as the queen was expected to arrive soon. The strict head maid supervised her work, and Mao couldn't help but admire the queen's reforms. She had heard about the queen's bold moves, shutting down illegal operations, including brothels, despite the anger it caused among powerful people. It was like rebranding a bad product and selling it again, Mao reflected. The queen's actions impressed her, and she found herself wanting to hear more about her. As the queen arrived at the palace, she was greeted by Jayakayu, who led her into the palace. Mao was present but remained quiet, still reflecting on her admiration for the queen. After some time, when the queen had played with Lingyi, a child she adored, and the little one had fallen asleep, the queen requested to speak with Mao privately. The two moved to a separate room where the queen expressed her concerns about the former king, who she believed had been under some kind of curse. She had heard of Mao's ability to solve problems and asked for her help in investigating this matter. That night, Mao lay awake, her mind filled with questions. What kind of curse could the former king have been under? She recalled how the former king had been a cruel and powerless man, controlled by others. He had married young girls, seizing their lands and power. One of his queens had even undergone surgery just to give him children. In the end, the current king had come to power, sacrificing his own mother in the process. Mao also wondered if the current king had a brother. These thoughts swirled in her mind, but she knew she had to uncover the truth. The next day, the queen invited all the royal ladies for a tea party. As the preparations were made, Mao noticed Jayakayu, who seemed tired and sleepy. Mao guessed that she might be pregnant, just like Lady Love, who had not yet shared the news. She also thought about Lady Lucy, who couldn't conceive, and Lady Len, who cared more for fashion than motherhood. Just as Mao was lost in these thoughts, the head maid arrived and pulled her aside. The maid warned Mao that the queen was coming soon, and she needed to inspect the snacks to ensure there was no poison. She also cautioned Mao not to involve Jayakayu in anything related to alcohol. Her stern tone made it clear that the maid held a position of authority. Mao understood the seriousness of the situation and agreed to check everything carefully. As she walked through the palace, inspecting the rooms, Mao's attention was drawn to a forbidden chamber that had once belonged to the late king. When she opened the door, a foul smell hit her. The maid told her that the room had been left untouched since the king's death and that no one dared to enter it. Mao was curious, but the maid spoke of a woman named Nancy, who had once prayed for the king's death. Nancy was, in fact, the queen. Mao began to wonder if the queen felt guilty for the king's death, thinking that her wish had caused it. However, the maid insisted that the king's death had been natural. What was truly disturbing, though, was that the king's body had not decayed. This shocked Mao. She knew that no matter how rich or poor someone was, their body would eventually rot and return to the earth. It was the natural order of life. So why hadn't the former king's body decayed? Mao was troubled by these thoughts and felt a growing sense of unease. She needed answers, but she also realized that uncovering the truth about the former king might lead to more questions, some of which could be far more dangerous than she imagined. Mao walked briskly through the imperial palace corridors, heading toward her destination. In a brief flashback, she recalled a request she had made earlier. She had asked the attendant if she could visit the late emperor's painting room. With a nod, the attendant granted her permission. Now, here she was, standing at the door of her new room, where she thanked Suiron for arranging her bed. As Mao was about to settle in, she noticed Suiron engrossed in a book. Suiron told Mao that she could visit the back room if she wanted to find more books to read. Curiously, Mao wandered into the back room and soon came across an old wooden box. Suiron opened the box and revealed it contained Jin's childhood toys. She showed Mao a small, delicate toy and explained that she had hidden it away from Jin. Suiron believed that Jin's mother had wanted him to grow up quickly, without any attachments to childish things. Mao, however, wasn't so sure about the toys and soon discovered something more unusual, a mysterious stone. Upon closer inspection, she realized it was poisonous. Suiron shared a bit more history, telling Mao that Jin had spent a lot of time in the inner court as a child. Mao felt a chill run down her spine, knowing that she was about to uncover the truth about the Empress Dowager's curse and the mystery surrounding the late emperor's body. The next day, Mao, Jin, and their companions ventured to a different part of the palace, where they examined the late emperor's old brushes. Anshi, a court official, approached Mao and mentioned that the late emperor had once painted something for her. Mao turned her attention to the surrounding area and noticed that one of the paintings seemed to stand out. The attendant hinted that the late emperor had once been in this room with someone who might still be serving in the palace. Gaeshun, one of Mao's allies, promised to investigate further. As Mao continued her examination, she noticed something peculiar about the wall. She was about to investigate more closely when an elderly man entered the room. Anshi, however, interrupted and revealed that the man was a mute slave. With no ability to speak, he could only nod or shake his head in response to questions. Mao tried to ask him about the wall, but the man's fidgeting hands told her he was hiding something. Determined to dig deeper, Mao removed a cloth from the wall, revealing a hidden painting. This artwork depicted several women, but it was one of the robes in the painting that caught Mao's attention. The color of the robe was created using orpiment, a poisonous stone that contained arsenic. Mao realized that the late emperor's body had been affected by arsenic over time, leading to his mysterious death. She speculated that the late emperor had used the paintings to secretly preserve his body from decay. Mao pondered this for a moment, reflecting that the late emperor had kept his painting activities hidden to avoid being mocked. She also theorized that the late emperor had entrusted the mute slave to safeguard these secrets. She pushed the painting aside, suspecting that there were more layers to uncover. The late emperor's mother, the Empress Regent, had been fiercely protective of him and had taken power for herself, preparing these materials for him in secret. Mao was convinced that the truth would soon be revealed. As Mao, Jin, and the others left the room, Anshi lingered behind, staring at the painting. She asked herself whether she was part of the hidden history within those brushstrokes. Then, she sighed and dismissed the thought, calling herself a mere fleeting presence in the emperor's legacy. Anshi's mind wandered back to the past, when the late emperor had forced her to bear his child. She recalled the day she realized the late emperor was unworthy of his title and had pushed her half-sister aside to claim power for himself. Years passed, and Anshi became a mother. She bore a son for the emperor, who eventually grew up to be accepted by the royal family. Despite this, Anshi never forgave the emperor for the cruelty he had shown her and her family. The late emperor's neglect had left Anshi bitter, and she came to realize that the palace had expanded not only in size, but also in the number of women bearing children for the emperor. As the years went on, the late emperor spent more time with younger women, becoming more and more distant from Anshi. In a moment of frustration, Anshi confronted him in bed, revealing her true feelings of anger and betrayal. Anshi's reflection on the past deepened as she recalled how the emperor had stopped visiting her. Despite his neglect, he had never stopped playing the puppet to his mother's wishes, unable to stand on his own. Anshi couldn't forgive him for his actions and his inability to take responsibility for his position. Eventually, she ordered the destruction of the portrait of herself that the emperor had painted during her youth. She wanted no part of it, no trace of the love and pain she had felt in those early years. In the present, Anshi and Suiron stood together in the painting room, where Jin handed Anshi the orpiment stone Suiron had found. Jin shared his memory of seeing the late emperor's painting of Anshi as a young woman. He suspected that the reason he had picked up the stone was because it had reminded him of that long-forgotten portrait. Jin then asked Anshi if she liked wearing clothes of that color, the same shade as the robe in the painting. Anshi hesitated, but quickly dismissed the connection, claiming it was merely a coincidence. However, her mind seemed to be wandering. She changed the subject and teasingly suggested that Jin had feelings for Mao. Jin, though dismissive of the idea, couldn't quite hide the truth in his eyes. Anshi saw through him and warned that if he didn't hide his true feelings, others would do it for him, just as she had hidden the emperor's paintings. Mao was introduced to 3 new maids at the Jade Pavilion by Jayakayu, Hakuyu, Kokuyu, and Sekiyu.
Same, but different. But still same.
At first, Mao found them almost identical, causing some confusion. However, the maids quickly explained that the only way to tell them apart was by the different colored ribbons they wore. One of the maids was already familiar to Mao's friend. Curious, Mao asked how they knew each other. Her friend smiled and explained that one of the maids, Haku, was the same age as Jayakayu, and they had known each other for years. Mao reflected that with more people around, the atmosphere was changing. Later, Mao decided she needed to return to her storage room to continue her experiments and learning. But her friend insisted that she shouldn't stay there anymore and should move back to her proper room. Mao, determined to stay where she had everything set up, clung to the door. Eventually, her friend dragged her over to Jayakayu, who chuckled when she heard the situation. If she wants to stay there, she can, Jayakayu said. but she should come here to sleep. Mao beamed with happiness, calling Jayakayu a good boss for being so understanding and kind. As Mao returned to her work, she noticed that life in the palace was becoming increasingly busy. One day, a maid brought a new girl named Yua to Mao's room and asked if she could stay there. Yua silently agreed and moved in, but Mao could sense that Yua seemed uncomfortable. Offering a warm invitation, Mao welcomed Yua into her space. Yua smiled and whispered that she had something fun planned for that evening, and Mao eagerly agreed to join. That night, Yua led Mao to a secluded house. A woman greeted them at the door, telling them to cover their heads, remove their shoes, and follow her. Mao observed the woman, noticing she had likely lived in the house for many years. Inside, there were several women sitting in a circle around a fire. Mao couldn't quite understand what was going on, but it turned out to be a gathering where the women shared horror stories. Yua was clearly frightened by the tales, but Mao found them dull and unexciting. One woman began telling a story about a haunted forest in her village, where locals believed an evil spirit resided. During a famine, a boy entered the forest to find food and returned with fruit, which he gave to his mother. That night, a strange light glowed from their house, and the villagers, convinced it was a ghost, spread rumors. The next morning, the boy was found dead, and his mother was barely alive. With her last breath, she whispered that she knew a deep secret. But before she could reveal it, she died. Mao yawned, uninterested in the tale, while Yua looked increasingly nervous. Another woman told a chilling story about a monk walking through a forest, seeking shelter in a couple's home. They offered him food, but he had nothing to give in return. The monk prayed for the couple's happiness, but soon, a fight broke out between them. The woman appeared with a sword, intent on killing the monk. As he continued chanting, the couple killed each other in their rage. The monk walked away unscathed. Mao was growing tired, but the storytelling continued. When it was her turn to share a tale, Mao recounted a story her stepfather had once told her about people seeing ghosts in the forest, but they were really just seeing someone carrying a lantern. The light fooled them into thinking it was a spirit. Yua found this unsettling, and Mao noticed something strange. Despite there being only 12 people in the room, the storyteller insisted there were 13. Then, the storyteller began her own eerie tale. She spoke of a king who had an unhealthy obsession with young girls, one of whom became pregnant. As the woman continued, Mao stared into the fire, her eyes heavy with sleep. Suddenly, the storyteller looked directly at Mao and said, "Now it's her turn." Mao snapped awake and rushed to the window, declaring that the woman was a fraud, trying to harm them. The room seemed to be filling with a strange gas, and Mao urged everyone to open the windows. As they did, the magical guards that had been watching over the gathering vanished, and the mysterious organizer of the event disappeared as well. Yua was confused, and Mao explained that the woman was researching an old legend about a mother and child. People had been cutting down trees in the area, which led to the growth of strange glowing mushrooms. At night, the mushrooms glowed so brightly that villagers mistook them for spirits. One night, after seeing the glow, the villagers found the mother and child nearly dead. The boy had already passed away, and the mother tried to share a secret, but she died before she could reveal it. The next morning, Mao and Yua were still shaken by the events of the previous night. They met a woman named Yangya, who explained that the woman they had been discussing had died a year ago. This revelation left them speechless, and as they returned to Mao's room, Yua decided to sleep beside her that night for comfort. Mao struggled with the heat as she tried to fall asleep, her mind racing. Meanwhile, in a quiet room across the palace, Jin sat alone, sipping his drink, lost in thought. Jin sat deep in thought, torn between the urge to reveal his past and the fear of the consequences. People often wondered why he kept his favorite things hidden, and even the queen had once questioned him about it. As he wrestled with his emotions, Gao Shun entered the room, greeting him with a cheerful good morning. Gao Shun, with his usual enthusiasm, teased Jin, claiming he couldn't hide things from him. But Jin, with a hint of seriousness in his voice, replied that he didn't want to hide anything. He was ready to open up, but the person he wished to share his truth with was none other than Mao. Meanwhile, Mao was in her storeroom, busy preparing a new batch of medicine. Her friend arrived, mentioning that Gao Shun had summoned her. Curious, she followed her friend, wondering what was going on. When Mao entered the room, she found both Jin and Gao Shun waiting. Without wasting time, Jin told Gao Shun that he wanted to take Mao with him for a few days. The sudden request left Mao reflecting on her time in the palace. Initially, she had only come temporarily, but her work had kept her around longer than expected. She used to stay near Jin, so the offer didn't seem entirely strange. Gao Shun, however, appeared slightly annoyed. "Why Mao?" he asked, clearly not pleased with the decision. Jin laughed, reassuring Gao Shun that he would return Mao in a few days. It was clear that Gao Shun felt a bit jealous, but Jin remained calm, convinced that he'd make this trip with Mao. He even thought to himself, bemused, that it took Gao Shun nearly 30 minutes to give his approval. The journey led them to another city where they were invited to a royal hunting event. As they traveled, Mao noticed a flag representing the region. The flag bore 3 distinct characters, symbols of 3 famous warriors loyal to the king. The flag also represented the region's mountainous and warm terrain. Basin, who accompanied them, explained all of this to Mao, but she barely paid attention. Her thoughts wandered as Basin warned her to be cautious at the royal estate and not cause trouble. Mao didn't think there was much to mess up during a hunting trip. Still, she found Basin oddly familiar, and a strange thought crossed her mind. Was he somehow related to Gao Shun? When they arrived at the estate, Mao was taken aback by how large and luxurious it was. The marketplace outside was bustling with activity, but as they entered the estate, she was hit with a wave of intense heat. To her surprise, Jin was sitting comfortably indoors, with all the windows and doors shut. Mao was baffled. How could someone sit so calmly in such heat? Jin explained that they weren't allowed to go outside, and they had to stay hidden indoors for some reason. Mao raised an eyebrow, suspecting that something wasn't right. Meanwhile, Basin whispered something to his father, who seemed to dismiss it, telling his son not to speak of it. The party outside seemed lavish and extravagant, but Mao was stuck indoors, feeling both bored and uncomfortable. She asked Jin if she could at least open a window or door, but he firmly refused. To keep her occupied, Jin asked her to taste the food for poison. Mao tasted the juice and gave it her approval, saying it was delicious and free of poison. Jin nodded and told Basin it was safe to eat. Basin took a bite, but moments later, he began to feel strange. Blood leaked from his mouth and he collapsed. Panic spread through the room as everyone tried to figure out what had happened. Mao, on edge, wondered if this was just another one of Jin's pranks. Gaishan quickly carried Basin to another room and told Mao to stay there for the night. She took a bath, trying to calm herself and think about the upcoming hunting trip. Something didn't sit right with her, and she had a feeling that trouble was brewing. Suddenly, the scene cut to a man loading a gun, hinting at an ambush. Mao's heart raced as she realized that danger might be closer than she thought. The next morning, the group headed into the forest for the hunting trip. Mao, however, wasn't thrilled about the rough outdoor life. The tents were uncomfortable, and she quickly grew bored. As she wandered off, she spotted Basin playing with an exceptionally smart puppy. The dog obeyed Basin's whistle commands perfectly, and Mao couldn't help but laugh. She joked that the dog was so sharp it could be recruited into the military. Basin chuckled, and Mao realized that he was quite clever despite his servant status. Later, during another party, the heat inside remained unbearable. The king offered Jin something to drink, but Jin declined, still hiding behind his veil. Mao couldn't help but notice how Jin, despite being the most important person at the party, hid his face from view. She wanted to help him, but Gao Shun signaled for her to stay back. Suddenly, Jin stood up and left the party quietly. Now, sensing something was wrong, rushed to fetch some medicine for him. She found him standing alone by a tree, looking troubled. Without saying a word, Mao grabbed his hand and led him to a more secluded spot, hoping to keep him out of sight. As they stopped, Jin finally spoke, his voice soft but determined. "I need to talk to you," he said, but before Mao could respond, a gunshot rang out. Jin reacted quickly, shoving Mao aside and pushing her to safety. He grabbed her and managed to run, dragging her toward a nearby waterfall. As they jumped into the rushing water, Mao thought this could be the end for them. But Jin, ever calm, swam them to a hidden cave, shielding them from their pursuers. Shivering and cold, Mao slowly regained consciousness. Jin had given her mouth-to-mouth resuscitation, and she was now lying beside him in the damp cave. Her clothes were soaked through, and she hesitated, embarrassed by her bony frame. She started to remove her outer garments, but Jin, noticing her discomfort, began to undress himself. When she offered to help him, he refused, saying he could manage on his own. As they settled into the cave, Mao took out some medicine she had packed and offered it to him. Jin gratefully accepted, though Mao was worried about his condition. The tension between them grew as Mao checked his temperature, confirming that his fever had gone down. She shared some of the medicine with him, and they both tried to make sense of the situation. Jin explained that the attackers had used gunpowder, a new weapon to them. Mao, now even more anxious, asked how they would escape the cave. Jin looked around and realized that Basin might know their location, but Gao Shun remained unaware. They eventually found an exit, but it was high up. Jin instructed Mao to climb onto his back and climb out. She hesitated, worrying about what Lady Surin would say and about Jin's high status. Still, she agreed and began to climb. As she struggled to maintain her grip, a frog suddenly landed on her head. Surprised, she lost her balance and fell, landing right on top of Jin. They both froze, their faces inches apart. Mao quickly tried to get up, but Jin gently pulled her back. They locked eyes, the air between them thick with tension. For a moment, neither of them spoke, and time seemed to slow. In that brief moment, everything felt different, as if the world outside had vanished. Lahaku sat alone, his mind racing with thoughts of Mao and Jin. The party had already begun, and the high-ranking guests were starting to notice the absence of their special guest, the very person they had all been waiting for. Jin, the Haku, couldn't help but wonder where he had gone. But there was also another person he couldn't stop thinking about, Mao. Gaoshan had dropped a hint that Mao was just a servant, and this made Lahaku suspicious. Something didn't feel right, and he needed to figure it out before things got worse. He even started considering ending the party early, just to avoid any potential complications. Meanwhile, in a quiet corner, Mao sat on Jin's lap, her thoughts foggy as she rested against his chest. His body radiated warmth, and the scent of his skin was intoxicating. As she absent-mindedly touched him, her hand landed somewhere it shouldn't have. At first, she thought it was a small frog that had fallen from above earlier. But when she touched it again, she realized it wasn't a frog at all. Her heart skipped a beat as the realization dawned on her. Jin's face suddenly shifted, becoming awkward, and she quickly connected the dots. Was this what she thought it was? Was Jin really not what she had assumed him to be? For so long, she had thought he wasn't interested in women, but now, looking at his face and the way he was reacting, doubts began to creep in. Jin tried to speak, but Mao, still in a daze, wasn't ready to listen. She nervously joked that maybe it was just a big, slimy frog that had landed on her head earlier, repeating the word frog over and over. But Jin had clearly had enough. It wasn't a frog, he snapped, his frustration building. Whatever you touched was clearly bigger than any frog. Mao, not willing to admit the awkwardness of the moment, insisted again, maybe it was just a big frog. Jin, clearly losing his composure, stood up and grabbed her, holding her firmly. His intense gaze locked with hers as he whispered, "Where do you think you're going? You can't escape now." Mao's heart raced. She panicked, realizing how trapped she was in this situation.
確認してみるか。
挑発が過ぎた。どうする？
Just as the tension between them was about to boil over, a dog barked loudly, interrupting the moment. Mao quickly whistled, and the dog jumped onto Jin, knocking him off her. She hugged the dog, praising it as a good boy. In the chaos, Mao spotted Lahaku nearby and pleaded for his help. Sensing the danger, Lahaku quickly intervened and helped them both escape. They found a safe spot, and Mao and Jin tried to explain their bizarre predicament. They claimed to have been attacked by bandits in the jungle, and though the attackers had guns, they couldn't see their faces. Jin suspected that someone with power was helping these bandits, and this only deepened the mystery. Meanwhile, a soldier found a piece of cloth in the jungle and brought it back to the royal guards. The cloth was recognized as part of Jin's clothing, and it set off a frantic search operation. The royals, fearing for Jin's safety, began to panic. Some wondered if Jin had planned this disappearance, but no one had the answers they needed. The dog, still on the hunt, later caught an old man who had been hiding in the forest. The soldiers continued searching near a waterfall, suspecting that the bandits might have hidden something there. They eventually discovered a merchant with an arrow that matched one found near the waterfall. They arrested the merchant, though he denied any involvement with the attack. To everyone's surprise, the soldiers believed his story and continued their search for the bandits. Meanwhile, Mao had already found the weapon that had been used in the attack. Thanks to the dog's keen sense of smell, she was able to track down the gun hidden in the jungle. The smell of the gunpowder was familiar to her, and once the gun was found, the soldier who had been with them complimented her on her resourcefulness. Jin, proud of the progress they'd made, announced that they had caught the man supplying weapons to the bandits. As the day's chaos slowly settled, the night party began. Gaoshan, deeply concerned for Jin's safety, silently prayed for him. He knew that the party was crucial, not just for the kingdom, but for Jin and Mao. He hoped that Jin had shared everything with her by now. At the party, a drunken man approached Jin, asking if he knew of a woman carrying a child. Jin denied it and walked away, clearly unsettled. Mao, standing by the window, watched the festivities below. She couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Her mind wandered to the bandits they had encountered in the jungle, hoping they were finally caught. But then a memory flashed in her mind, twins from her past. One of them had claimed she was pregnant, and the memory lingered, making her uneasy. Suddenly, Jin appeared at the gate. He asked Mao not to open it, but she could see the remorse in his eyes. "I just came to apologize for what happened at the waterfall," he said. Mao, equally apologetic, admitted she hadn't meant to cause any trouble. She also confessed that she struggled with understanding human emotions, and this was why she found it difficult to handle situations like the one with him earlier. "I will always be your master," she said quietly, unsure if she was speaking to comfort herself or him. She didn't know why she was saying it, but it felt like the right thing to do. Jin handed her a small package, and as she opened it, she found a rare stone, an ingredient used to make powerful medicine. Mao was overjoyed and thanked him sincerely. And well, long story short, Jin got the door shut in his face and Mao's mind wandered into some questionable territory. Meanwhile, Jin stood outside, trying to speak to her again. He had something important to tell her, something that could change everything. but Mao was too lost in her thoughts to hear him. She didn't know what to make of the situation, but she knew one thing for sure: things were far from simple. Mao and her friend Xiaolin were casually discussing what Xiaolin would do after her time at the palace ended. Xiaolin's service was coming to a close in just 6 months, and she was anxious about her future. "Do you have any connections that could help me find a good job?" she asked Mao. Mao thought for a moment, considering introducing her to the Verdigris House, a prestigious establishment in the pleasure district where she had been raised. But she hesitated. Becoming a courtesan wasn't a simple suggestion, and it came with a heavy price. Just as Mao was about to speak, their friend Shisui walked in, offering a different idea. Shisui suggested they use the palace bathhouse to meet influential people. This bathhouse wasn't just a place for relaxation, it was a key part of palace life. With separate sections for high-ranking concubines, mid-ranking concubines, and servant girls, it was a place where one could connect with those who held power, give massages or offer beauty treatments to the concubines, Shisui advised. It could lead to valuable gifts and even job opportunities. The three of them decided to go ahead with the plan, with Xiaolin eager to take part. At the bathhouse, Mao kept her ears open, soaking in the gossip and learning about the palace's inner workings. She overheard that several high-ranking concubines, including Lady Jyokuyo and possibly Lady Lulan and Lady Lihua, were pregnant. This news created a buzz of excitement, but also tension, as it meant shifts in the palace's power dynamics. Another rumor caught Mao's attention: 30 new eunuchs had arrived, possibly former slaves from foreign lands, which could mean more changes for the palace staff. While at the bathhouse, Mao was approached by 2 ladies-in-waiting from the Jade Pavilion, Haku and Kokuyu. They seemed concerned about her frequent absences from her duties and pointed out that Siku, the youngest lady-in-waiting, was feeling lonely. They suggested that Mao take Siku along to the bathhouse, where she could join the others in helping with the massages and beauty treatments. Though Siku was initially shy, she agreed and soon found herself working alongside Mao, Xiaolin, and Shisui. As the girls went about their tasks, Mao noticed Lady Liu, a 15-year-old high-ranking concubine, arriving at the public bathhouse instead of her private one at the Diamond Pavilion. Despite her position, Lady Liu looked uncomfortable and out of place. Mao observed the razor rashes on Lady Liu's skin and, in an effort to help, offered to demonstrate a new hair removal technique using thread. The gesture was a small but meaningful act of kindness, and it helped break the ice between the two. Curious about Lady Liu's decision to use the public bathhouse, Mao gently asked why she didn't use her private facilities. Hesitant at first, Lady Liu eventually revealed something shocking. Her private bathhouse was haunted by a ghost. The revelation left Mao stunned. As Lady Liu spoke, she shared more about her tragic past. She had been brought to the palace as an infant, used for political purposes, and after the previous emperor's death, she was sent to a monastery. Only later was she brought back as a concubine. Mao couldn't help but feel sympathy for the young woman, realizing how much trauma she had endured. The bathhouse, as it turned out, wasn't just a place for relaxation. It was also a hub of gossip, where palace politics and personal stories collided. As the girls bathed and massaged the concubines, they learned more about the palace's intricate social dynamics. Even servants like them could use these moments to strategically position themselves for better opportunities in the future. Lady Jyokuyo, who had recognized the value of these visits, appreciated Mao's ability to gather information, understanding how important these casual conversations were. Mao's sharp observation skills continued to serve her well, from noticing Siku's discomfort to picking up on the tiny details about Lady Liu's skin irritation. The ghostly revelation was just the beginning of what seemed like a deeper mystery surrounding the palace's power and its people. Mao was busy working alongside one of the palace maids, but her mind kept drifting. The events from the previous evening were haunting her thoughts. Lady Liu had told her a chilling story about a ghost she had seen while bathing. The mere thought of it made Mao wonder what kind of ghost it could have been. She had even suggested to Liu that she should talk to Jin, who was known for handling matters like this. As Mao reflected on this, her thoughts shifted back to a memory of a hunting trip, when she had accidentally touched Jin's frog while escaping into a cave. She couldn't help but wonder, was it really just a frog? Or was there something more to Jin's secrets? Was he really a eunuch, as everyone believed, or was there more beneath the surface? Mao was pulled from her musings when Geishin arrived, calling her away as usual. Jin had come to her with a new problem, the ghost sighting. Liu had told him about it, and now he wanted Mao to investigate. Geishin was curious about which concubine had seen the ghost, but the maid insisted that Mao should not go. However, Jin assured Gaishin not to worry and promised to return Mao safely after a few days. With a teasing laugh, Jyokuyo, who was pregnant, mentioned that Jin always came to take Mao away. Jin, in his usual playful manner, replied, "Yes, I'm here for Mao. I want her, and when she returns, she won't be able to speak because I'll seal her lips." He touched her lips lightly, hinting at a secret that needed to be kept. Mao couldn't help but blush as Jin took her with him. When they arrived at Liu's palace, Jin began to question her about the ghost. He asked gently, and Mao observed how he treated each concubine with such care. Liu pointed to a room where the ghost was said to appear, and her maid explained that the ghost would only show itself when the window was opened. As Jin prepared to investigate, one of the senior maids made a sarcastic remark, claiming Liu was just a child imagining things. Mao immediately noticed that the maid was arrogant and disrespected the concubines. To make matters worse, the maid was wearing a hairpin that didn't belong to her, it was from another concubine. Jin, noticing the tension, walked up to the maid, apologized, and calmly stated, "I'm sorry, but I have to do my duty." The maid nervously agreed, and Jin then feigned throat pain. Mao knew Jin's tactic. He was using the moment to talk to Liu alone. Without the distractions of the other women, Liu began to explain her experience. "One night, while bathing, I heard a strange noise. When I opened the window, I saw a pale woman staring at me through the mist, smiling eerily. I was terrified, and I began to cry," Liu recalled. Mao listened intently but suspected there might be more to the story. Kana, Liu's maid, confirmed she had seen the figure too but found nothing when she went to check the room. Mao opened the window and began inspecting the surroundings, noticing the odd placement of the bathroom. It was isolated, away from the living quarters. She spotted a nearby storage room and asked to move a table, revealing termite-infested wood underneath. However, Kana insisted the room had been built recently, which only raised Mao's suspicions. She immediately instructed Gaishin to bring the blueprint of the room's layout. After studying it, she realized that the storage room was directly connected to the bathtub area. There was something off about the design, and Mao wasn't about to let it slide. She turned back to Liu and asked, what did the ghost's face look like? Liu described it as round and strange, which didn't match the usual ghostly appearances Mao had encountered. Her eyes then landed on a copper mirror hanging in the room. When she asked why it was there, Liu explained that it had belonged to her late mother and was precious to her. Mao polished the mirror carefully, studying the room further. That's when she had an epiphany. She suspected that the steam from the hot water caused the curtains to flutter, and the reflection of the steam on the copper mirror created the illusion of a ghostly figure. Mao held the mirror up to the window and let the light hit it just right. A ghostly face appeared on the wall, Liu's late mother's face, smiling eerily. Liu gasped and burst into tears. Mao, now understanding the cause of the ghost, explained, "This phenomenon occurs because of the mirror. It's a very skilled artifact, crafted by a master. The steam from the hot water rises, and the mirror reflects the vapor onto the curtain, creating the illusion of a figure." Liu, overwhelmed by the revelation, recalled how her mother used to dance beautifully before she was born. But after Liu was born, her mother had stopped dancing and passed away soon after, leaving Liu all alone. Mao, unfamiliar with emotions as deep as those, struggled to understand the loneliness that Liu was experiencing. She had never felt such pain herself. Just then, another maid walked up and scolded Liu for crying, calling it shameful. Mao, furious, scolded the maid back, telling her to shut up. Then Jin entered the room, removed the maid's hairpin, and declared that she was no longer a senior maid and should now act like a regular one. It was the first time Mao had seen Jin angry. Later that day, Mao visited the palace doctor and asked how one could confirm if someone was truly a eunuch. The doctor was flustered but explained that whenever anyone enters or leaves palace service, they are physically examined by 3 officials. The doctor mentioned that 30 new eunuchs had arrived, and they were all quite attractive. Gaishin, speaking to Jin, teased him, mentioning that one of the women seemed to be flirting with one of the eunuchs, who was particularly handsome. Jin, clearly intrigued, asked Gaishin about one eunuch who stood out from the rest. Gaishin revealed that this eunuch wore gloves to cover mysterious marks on his hands and didn't let anyone see them. He was also popular with the women, charming and intelligent. Jin smiled and spoke to the newcomers, telling them that their roles would be assigned based on their skills. Gaishin then whispered to Jin, teasing him that a lot of women liked him too. Mao's friend accidentally bumps into a man carrying a block of ice, causing it to slip from his hands and crash to the ground. The scene freezes as everyone nearby stares in shock. The man is furious, the ice was meant for Lady Len and now it's ruined. He shouts at Mao's friend, and the poor girl is overwhelmed with guilt. Quickly, Mao steps in to protect her friend, apologizing sincerely, but the man's anger isn't appeased. He retorts, "Sorry won't fix this. What am I supposed to say now?" You've ruined the ice. Mao, thinking that the ice must be incredibly expensive, so valuable it could be traded for a person, quickly comes up with a plan. She offers to take the ice and make something useful out of it, something the man can still present to Lady Len. The man, desperate and seeing no other option, agrees but warns Mao she has only 1 hour to come up with something, or there will be serious consequences. Mao nods and runs off, grabbing her friend's hand as they head towards the kitchen. As they reach the doctor's office, her friend breaks down in tears, something Mao has never seen before. Earlier, her friend had been so happy about receiving a hairpin from a concubine. Now, the ice has ruined everything. Mao knows she has to act fast to fix things. She quickly starts thinking of what ingredients she can use to make something with the remaining ice. With the clock ticking, she recalls the cheerful, lively friend she's known, and it pains her to see her crying. If I don't help her now, I won't be able to sleep tonight, she thinks to herself. At that moment, Mao notices Jin watching her from a distance with a gentle smile on his face. He silently follows her as she walks into the kitchen, and she can't help but wonder what he's thinking. Jin approaches her and asks if she needs anything. Mao responds quickly, yes, I need access to the kitchen and some ingredients. Jin teases her, fine, but what will you give me in return? Mao glares at him and says, stop messing around. Just give me what I need. Jin smirks and asks, why are you going to such lengths for your friend? Mao pauses before responding, she was the first person who befriended me when I came to the palace. She's kind, loyal, and has always stood by my side. Helping her is the least I can do. She adds, if I don't help her now, I won't be able to sleep tonight. Jin nods, but before he walks away, he adds a condition. Next time you talk to someone, listen to them first. Don't interrupt or ignore what they're saying. I'm telling you this for your own good. Mao nods, reflecting on his advice. Maybe she should have talked to someone else, like Joa, or even approached Lady Len directly. But before she can think more about it, her hair ribbon falls. Jin picks it up, and with a teasing smile, he asks, don't you ever use hairpins? Mao responds, I don't have any. Jin reminds her, remember the hair ornament I gave you at the garden party? Did you sell it? Mao denies it, and Jin insists, then wear it. That's the condition. Wear it, and you can use the kitchen. With no other choice, Mao agrees. As she enters the kitchen, she quickly gets to work. She gathers various fruits, fresh milk, and what's left of the ice. Her plan is simple, make ice cream using the remaining ice. The man who had yelled earlier is growing anxious, but Mao asks him to wait outside. I'll call you when it's ready, she says firmly. With her friend's help, Mao starts the process. Her friend mixes the milk while Mao crushes the ice and places it into a jar. She pours the milk over the ice and begins churning it, watching as it slowly starts to freeze. She adds chopped fruit pieces, hoping it'll be enough. She briefly considers adding eggs or other flavors, but with time running out, she decides to stick with what she has. Once the ice cream is ready, Mao offers her friend a taste. Her friend's face lights up, and she exclaims, this is delicious. Mao smiles, relieved that the ice cream turned out well. She then calls the man back in, asking him to deliver the dessert to Lady Len. To make sure it tastes good, Mao even feeds him a bite herself. The man nods in approval and takes the ice cream away. Mao breathes a sigh of relief. The problem has been solved, at least for now. As Mao and her friend relax, her second friend joins them, eager to taste the ice cream. They all sit together, enjoying the treat. Gyakuyo, who is pregnant, gently touches her belly and smiles as her daughter, Lingi, also touches it in awe. When Lingi was in my womb, she used to kick downward. Gyakuyo says softly, but this baby kicks upward. Mao, now deeply concerned, enters to check on the pregnancy. She asks, who delivered the first baby? Gyakuyo answers calmly, I did it myself. There were no doctors around at the time. Mao furrows her brow. This could be a breech delivery, she thinks. She explains that if the baby's head is facing downward, the delivery will be easier. But if the legs are pointing down and the head is up, the delivery becomes dangerous. Mao suspects this might be the case and whispers that she needs to conduct a more thorough examination. Later, when Gyakuyo lies down, Mao checks her carefully. A maid nervously asks if there's a problem. Mao hesitates before replying, my suspicion might be correct. Gaoshan becomes anxious and asks what they should do. Mao explains that they'll need someone with experience, someone who has helped with many deliveries before. The maid panics, saying there's no one like that around. Mao then mentions someone she knows, her adoptive father, who has delivered many babies. The maid protests, saying no criminal should be allowed near Gyakuyo. But Mao tries to reason with her, explaining that her father was never truly proven guilty of any crime. Gaoshan steps in, calming the situation. She tells the maid to listen to Mao. Mao then insists that her father has the experience needed to help, but they'll need Jin's permission first. Gaoshan agrees to write to him, feeling confident that he'll allow it. The letter is sent, and Mao's father soon arrives at the palace. As he walks through the gates, he gazes at the building and reflects on how long it's been since he was last here. He meets Gaoshan and announces, "I've come to assist with the birth for a few days." Mao, meanwhile, feels a pang of worry. What will happen to the existing staff now that her father is here? Will someone be replaced? The other maids watching from a distance whisper, "Her father is so calm and gentle." Mao doesn't understand their comparison. They're saying that she's nothing like her father, she's impulsive and loud, while he's peaceful and soft-spoken. Her thoughts are interrupted when the scene shifts to the forest, where a mysterious man is deep in thought, unaware of the storm brewing in the palace. Mao held the hairpin in her hands, the one Jin had given her during the festival. He had promised her that she could wear it and even reminded her of the promise a few days ago. But now, as she gazed at it, she hesitated. She found it, but something made her hold off on wearing it. Instead, she decided to keep it close for now. She was in the middle of preparing some medicine, and her father was there beside her. He had always taught her to make something useful out of almost anything, even the waste. From a simple comment of his, she had learned how to make 10 different things. Mao admired her father deeply. He was a brilliant doctor, but they lived a modest life in a tiny house. She couldn't help but wonder why honest people, like her father, often stayed poor. As she mixed her ingredients, a nearby doctor asked, "What are you making?" She responded, "Medicine," but her father scolded her gently, saying she should always ask before using supplies. He then started writing something down on paper. Mao teasingly asked, "Are you going to spend the whole day writing?" But deep down, she was happy her father was there. He was always the one who ensured everything went smoothly, even when difficult situations arose, like when a concubine was giving birth. Her father was an expert in his field and loved writing warnings to help others. He had been living there for many years and had seen enough to know that it was better to be safe than sorry. Mao noticed that workers in the area changed every 2 years, yet her father kept posting the same warnings year after year. She began to wonder if someone might be misusing these notes. A doctor nearby read one of her father's warnings aloud, laughing at how the handwriting looked childish. Her father simply replied that complicated things should be written simply so everyone could understand them. He even suggested reusing paper by melting it down, just like they did in his village. Mao was impressed by her father's practicality. Then, he told Mao that a new school had opened nearby. He suggested she ask them what they did with used paper, and if they accepted it for recycling, they could donate theirs too. Mao agreed and said she would find out. After finishing the preparations for her herbs, Mao stored them in a small box and left. As she stepped outside, she thought about the hairpin again. She wondered if she should wear it now, but still hesitated. People knew it was a gift from Jin, and she worried that her friends might tease her, so she decided to skip wearing it for now. While walking, she met an old man who immediately recognized her father's handwriting. He spoke fondly of her father, reminiscing about how he could predict future problems before they even happened. The old man said that her father was clever but never wanted to be a doctor. Instead, he had chosen to serve the poor. If he had wanted, he could have been a great officer, but he dedicated his life to healing others. It was clear from the old man's words that her father had made a big impact on many lives. The man recalled how her father used to post handwritten notes everywhere to help people learn. He asked Mao if the paper she was holding was one of those notices, and she confirmed it. The notes contained important warnings, like not using certain powders or avoiding specific sands and flowers. Suddenly, Mao grabbed the paper and rushed towards someone, an elderly lady doctor who was likely unaware of the note on the bulletin board. The elderly doctor told her that the liquid in her medicine was strong alcohol used to knock people out before stitching up wounds. Mao asked her how long the workers usually stayed here, and the doctor shared that it was unusual for someone to stay for as long as she had. Most workers, she explained, only stayed for about 2 years, but she had been there for 20 years. Mao found this odd and started suspecting that there was something more to the situation than met the eye. As the conversation continued, Mao began to piece things together. She wondered if the elderly doctor had been secretly sending notes or substances to others during treatments. These substances, she suspected, might be ending up in the market, but without any proof, she couldn't act just yet. Apologizing for taking up so much of the doctor's time, Mao noticed a bookshelf nearby. Curious, she opened a book and found an insect inside. She immediately recognized it. This same insect had been with her friend Sushi. Mao wondered how Sushi could have known it was a rare insect. She also realized that the book in which the insect was hidden must be very expensive, and Sushi was just a worker. How could she afford such a book? This puzzle only deepened Mao's suspicions. Just then, she heard a voice behind her. It was Siri, someone she hadn't expected to encounter. He warned Mao that she had been investigating things she shouldn't have and told her she couldn't leave. She considered attacking him with the alcohol bottle and running, but she noticed the weapon in his hand. If she tried to run, she might end up hurt. She stood her ground, telling him, if you harm me, you'll have to answer to others. But instead of taking action against her, Siri brought her friend Sushi in front of her. Sushi, looking frightened, begged Mao for forgiveness. She admitted that she had secretly read the books and now they were both in trouble. Siri made a chilling offer. He would only let Sushi go if Mao agreed to one condition. What kind of condition? Mao asked, her heart racing. He explained that she had to go with him to a certain location outside, where he would explain things to her. Mao, now confused and unsure of her next move, agreed to hear him out. As she followed Siri, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. Meanwhile, in another part of the kingdom, an emperor from a distant land met with Lan, a military leader. Lan was shown a powerful weapon capable of long-range attacks. Lan seemed pleased and agreed to the deal, though his companion watched him with suspicion. After drinking some juice, Lan began acting strangely, and it was clear he had been drugged. Despite his odd behavior, he offered more of the special juice to the other man, who politely declined. Later, a woman wearing a burqa appeared, but it was soon revealed that she was actually a man. Observers began to suspect that this was Lan's daughter, but no one was sure. The entire situation felt strange and convoluted. Amidst all this, Mao remained deep in thought, sitting alone in a dark room. Perhaps, she thought, she was about to be taken somewhere. She couldn't yet piece together all the parts of the puzzle, but she knew one thing for certain: nothing was as it seemed. That concludes the anime recap. As always, if you enjoyed, let me know down below and I'm out.